Imagine this. You open your eyes in total darkness. The air is cold, damp, and thick with the scent of clay and metal. Somewhere close, water drips, a slow, steady rhythm echoing in the hollow distance. As your eyes adjust, shadows shift into shapes. Faces. Hundreds of them. No, thousands. Eyes that never blink. Mouths that never speak. Warriors frozen in time, their spears raised, their armor gleaming faintly beneath the dust. Horses mid-stride, generals standing tall. All made of earth, yet lifelike enough to breathe. You think you've stumbled into a museum, maybe some vast underground gallery. But no. You're standing in the afterlife of an emperor, a kingdom built to last forever, deep beneath the soil of China. Beneath the farmlands of Xi'an, an army sleeps. They stand shoulder to shoulder, buried for over 2,000 years, waiting in ranks that stretch farther than the eye can see. The Terracotta Army, an entire world molded from clay. But the silence here isn't just the stillness of time, it's a kind of reverence, heavy and watchful, as though every warrior knows something you don't. You can almost feel their gaze, each one fixed on the same point in the darkness, guarding something sacred. Or dangerous. Breathe in. The air tastes of iron and dust, the faint ghost of ancient fires. Imagine the flicker of torchlight glinting across 1,000 helmets, the scent of damp earth stirred after centuries of stillness. Every footstep you take feels like an intrusion, like trespassing through a dream the world was never meant to wake. Because this is no tomb. It's an empire beneath the earth. And at its center, somewhere beyond these silent ranks, lies the man they were built to protect, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The man who refused to die. You can almost hear the faint echo of drums, ghostly, rhythmic, as if time itself is marching backward. You step closer to one of the soldiers. The clay is cold beneath your fingers, rough where age has eaten at the edges. His eyes, wide, unyielding, stare past you, forever locked on a horizon that no longer exists. Every wrinkle, every fold in his armor, every vein carved into his hand, crafted by human hands more than 2 millennia ago. No two faces are the same. Imagine that. Thousands of soldiers, each sculpted in unique detail. Not stamped, not copied. Individual men, reborn in clay. But who were they? Were their faces modeled after real soldiers, men who once marched under the emperor's banner? Or were they imagined by artisans who dreamed them into being, one by one, until the army was whole? Archaeologists still debate that question. But standing here, surrounded by them, it's hard to believe they weren't once alive. Look closely enough and you start to feel it, the eerie intimacy of it all. The curve of a lip mid-command, the furrow of a brow fixed forever in vigilance. Some faces are youthful, smooth, filled with pride. Others, older, their expressions weary but unbroken. You can almost sense their breath caught in time. And then, the silence thickens again. You remember that these soldiers aren't guarding a treasure of gold or jewels. They're guarding something far greater, the immortal dream of the man who made them. Long before this place was built, there was a boy named Qin. He was born into a kingdom torn apart by war. China, in his youth, wasn't a single nation, it was 7 warring states, each clawing for dominance. Kings rose and fell like waves, dynasties devoured one another, and rivers ran red with the blood of ambition. Yet from that chaos, the boy who would become Qin Shi Huang began to rise. They said he was ruthless, even as a child. Brilliant. Paranoid. Obsessed with control. By the time he was 13, he wore a crown that half his own people resented. By 22, he commanded armies large enough to crush kingdoms. And by the age of 39, he had done what no one before him dared dream. He united all of China beneath a single rule. He declared himself Shi Huangdi, the first emperor. Imagine that moment. After centuries of war, one man stood above it all. And yet, even then, even with the world at his feet, He feared the one enemy no army could defeat, death. That fear, that whisper in the dark that all kings hear, drove him to build this, an empire underground, an army of clay, a mirror of the living world to accompany him beyond the grave. Because if he could not conquer death and life, he would command it in eternity. The first torches to light this underground world must have burned with sacred purpose. The artisans, tens of thousands of them, descended into the earth to shape his vision. Imagine the sound, chisels striking stone, hammers echoing in the dark, the low murmur of men working by lamplight. Clay, water, fire, and sweat combined to forge immortality. Every warrior, every chariot, every horse, sculpted by hand, painted in vivid color that once shimmered beneath oil lamps before vanishing into the centuries. The colors are gone now, faded into the dust. But once, this army stood bright as sunrise, reds, blues, greens, and golds. A living world sealed beneath the ground, never meant to be seen again. Until, of course, it was. In 1974, a farmer digging a well struck something hard beneath the soil. At first, he thought it was a fragment of a pot, just another relic from the past. But as he cleared the dirt away, a face emerged. A human face. Clay eyes staring up through the earth, unblinking after 2,000 years. That discovery, the head of a single soldier, led to one of the greatest archaeological revelations in history. What they uncovered wasn't just a tomb. It was a buried civilization. And now, you stand in the same silence those farmers must have felt, that strange mix of awe and dread when the past breathes again. The air feels alive down here. The earth hums faintly under your feet, as though the heartbeat of an emperor still pulses through it. You imagine what lies beyond the sealed walls, beyond the ranks of soldiers. They say his actual tomb, the resting place of Qin Shi Huang himself, remains untouched. A vast underground palace, sealed tight, rumored to contain rivers of mercury flowing through jeweled canals that map the heavens. Scientists have tested the soil above it. The mercury levels are real. Lethal even now. The stories weren't just myth. But no one dares open it, not yet. Perhaps not ever. And so it waits. He waits. You take one last look at the soldiers, their faces lost again in shadow. The silence feels heavier now, not just the quiet of a buried army, but the weight of a man's ambition echoing through time. A ruler who sought to conquer not just nations, but the very limits of mortality. His empire has crumbled. His palaces are dust. His name has become legend. But his army still stands. Imagine standing face to face with a soldier who hasn't blinked in 2 millennia, still guarding his emperor in the darkness. Still waiting for a command that will never come. This is where the story begins, beneath the fields of Xi'an, in the heart of the earth, where silence is not the absence of life, but its echo. And as we move deeper into this buried world, through soil and time alike, the question grows louder with every step. What does it mean to live forever, if you must be buried to do it? You stand among the rows of silent soldiers, your breath rising faintly in the chilled air of the underground vault. The clay faces seem to shift with the flicker of your imagination, each one a frozen echo of life that once obeyed the will of a single man. You turn slowly, feeling the weight of his presence even here, centuries after his last heartbeat. The soldiers stare not at you, but towards some invisible horizon, as though waiting for the sound of his voice. And you realize, as your eyes trace their unyielding gaze, that all of this, every spear, every chariot, every grain of packed earth around you, was built for one man. A man who refused to die. Imagine him now, far above this underground realm, 2,000 years ago, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. His empire stretched farther than any before him, walls uncoiling across mountains, roads cutting through forests, rivers bridged and named for eternity. To the people, he was not just a ruler, he was the world itself given human form. His words shaped reality. His anger could erase entire villages. His dreams, terrifying, magnificent dreams, were built with the sweat and bones of millions. But beneath the golden armor and the rituals of power, there was something else. A fear. The kind that gnaws quietly in the dark hours before dawn. The kind every human feels, no matter how high their throne is raised. Death. For all his armies, for all his walls, for all his decrees carved into stone, Qin Shi Huang could not command the one thing that ruled even him: time. They said he could not sleep without guards stationed at his chamber doors, and even then he woke in panic, heart racing, certain that ghosts had come to collect what he owed them. He had lived through endless betrayal. His own mother accused of conspiracy, his father's court riddled with assassins, his counselors whispering behind their scrolls. He had survived poison, arrows, blades hidden in instruments of peace. But the thought of dying like any ordinary man, was the one terror he could never silence. So he did what emperors do when faced with the impossible. He ordered it to be solved. "Find me the secret," he commanded his alchemists. "Bring me immortality." And with that, the greatest empire on earth turned its gaze toward eternity. In his palace, firelight flickered against bronze mirrors. Alchemists and magicians bowed low, their faces powdered with crushed pearls, their robes stained with smoke and mercury. They promised him potions brewed from jade dust and molten gold, from rare herbs gathered under eclipsed moons. They spoke of a hidden realm across the eastern sea, where islands floated in the mist and immortals lived in palaces of white jade. They said that if he could find these islands, he would find eternal life. Qin Shi Huang believed them. He sent fleets of ships eastward, carrying hundreds of young men and women chosen to never return until they found that mythical shore. Some said they reached Japan. Others said they were swallowed by storms. The emperor waited for word that never came. Still, he persisted. He drank elixirs laced with mercury, convinced it was the essence of life. He swallowed jade pills until his lips turned pale and his hands trembled with poison. Every remedy promised immortality. Every dose drew him closer to death. But fear is a stubborn master, and he obeyed it faithfully. Walk with me, now, through his palace, the one that once glittered with light enough to make night forget itself. Bronze bells hung from the rafters, their tones resonating through endless corridors. Courtiers bowed so low their foreheads left polished marks on the floor. Incense rose in curling threads, thick as mist. And at the heart of it all, seated on a throne carved from obsidian and gold, was the emperor himself. He wore robes the color of thunderclouds, trimmed with white fox fur. His hair was bound in a crown of jade, his eyes sharp as drawn steel. When he spoke, scribes leaned forward, terrified to miss a word. Because here, words were law. To question them was treason. To misunderstand them could be death. He ordered new roads to connect every corner of his empire, so that his will could move faster than rebellion. He demanded a single written language, a single currency, a single standard of measure, one voice to speak for all under heaven. The world, he decided, should reflect his order perfectly, just as the underground empire would one day mirror the living one. He was not content with unity. He wanted permanence. But permanence came at a price. Tales spread of his temper, of scholars buried alive for opposing him, of entire families executed because one man spoke against the throne. He believed himself the axis of the universe, and yet he trusted no one. Not his generals, not his priests, not even his sons. Especially not them. As his power grew, so did his isolation. At night the courtiers would whisper of him wandering the halls, torch in hand, muttering to spirits only he could see. The torchlight trembled against the bronze mirrors, throwing back his reflection again and again. 100 emperors watching him from the walls, each one reminding him that even the greatest are still mortal. He began to change palaces every few nights, traveling secretly in disguised carriages to escape assassins that might exist only in his mind. The people called it the Emperor's Procession of Shadows. Wherever he went, an army of servants followed, rebuilding the world around him with each sunrise. New carpets, new banners, the same fear. And through it all, the great project continued, the tomb beneath the mountain, the underground realm that would never decay. Imagine the construction, thousands of laborers digging, sculpting, firing clay until the air itself shimmered with heat. Entire villages emptied of craftsmen. Convicts, artisans, soldiers, all working in secret, generation after generation. The emperor visited the site once, they say, and stood at its threshold, watching the flames of the kilns flicker like stars across the valley. He smiled then, for the first time in years. "This," he whispered, "will not die." The architects built the vaults to mirror heaven and earth. They mapped rivers, fields, palaces. They recreated the empire in miniature, complete, eternal, untouchable. When he died, he would rule again in this silent kingdom, surrounded by clay servants who would never betray him. They say when he first looked upon a completed soldier, perfect, lifelike, eyes carved with uncanny depth, he laughed softly and said, "Even death will bow to me." But death does not bow. It waits. The emperor's obsession grew fevered. His doctors prescribed new elixirs, more metals, stranger brews. The court learned to smile when he drank them, to praise his vigor, to pretend they did not see his trembling hands or the gray creeping through his hair. He was aging, and he hated it. So he turned again to the east. Another fleet was prepared, larger than before. He dreamed of standing on those mythical islands, drinking from springs that reversed time itself. He never made it. During one of his endless journeys inspecting the empire, perhaps seeking to outrun the ghosts that followed him, he fell ill. Some say it was heat stroke. Others, mercury poisoning. Whatever the cause, the emperor who refused to die met the one truth he could not command. They say his attendants dared not speak the news. They hid his death for weeks, driving his carriage back toward the capital with barrels of salted fish to mask the smell of decay. His courtiers pretended he was merely sleeping. They feared the chaos his death would unleash. When the truth finally reached the palace, the empire shook. Succession was bloody, rebellions flared. His dynasty crumbled within years. All that remained unbroken was the tomb, the vast, sealed world he had built beneath the earth. And so, while his living empire fractured, his eternal one endured. The light from your torch catches the edge of a warrior's cheek, the faint trace of color still clinging to the clay. You realize that these soldiers, these silent guardians, are not just art. They are his last command fulfilled, his final defiance of the inevitable. Even now, his empire above ground is dust. His palaces are gone, his roads worn thin. But here his army still stands, perfect in their obedience, endless in their vigil. You close your eyes and imagine his voice carried through the centuries. "Let no man forget me. Let my rule never end." Perhaps he succeeded. Because as you stand in the half-dark, surrounded by faces shaped in his shadow, you understand. This is immortality, of a kind. Not the soft promise of eternal life, but the harder truth of memory and fear. He is dead, yes. But his dream lives on in the silence of clay and stone, in the whispered awe of those who still come to see what he built. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere beneath your feet, in the unopened chamber said to glitter with mercury rivers and jeweled stars, he still sits upon his throne, eyes closed, lips curved in the faintest smile, believing that he never died at all. The air grows colder. The soldiers seem to lean closer, as though listening. You take a step forward, deeper into the earth, where the shadows thicken and the air hums faintly with memory. The story isn't finished. Ahead waits the vision that started it all, the underground paradise he demanded, a world remade for eternity. The deeper you go, the more you begin to understand, this was never about death. It was about control. And what he built down here was not a tomb. It was a universe. The air grows heavier as you move deeper underground, the silence thickening until it feels almost alive. You pass between rows of clay soldiers, their spears angled toward the dark ahead. The floor beneath your feet changes, from packed soil to smooth, polished earth, and a faint shimmer begins to ripple across the walls. For a moment, you think it's just your light-catching mineral veins in the clay. But then you realize, this shimmer was placed here deliberately. The walls themselves were glazed to reflect, to glow faintly under torchlight. A ghostly reminder that even underground, the Emperor demanded brilliance. The further you walk, the more the army fades behind you, replaced by something stranger, quieter. The soldiers end, but the tunnels continue, their ceilings arched, their walls etched with patterns that look almost like constellations. And it hits you. This place isn't only a grave. It's a map. The world above was united under Qin Shi Huang's rule, but the world below, this labyrinth, was meant to outlast it. Here, the Emperor envisioned eternity itself. A world remade not as it was, but as it should be, eternal, ordered, perfect. Long before he was crowned emperor, when he was still a boy prince, Qin Shi Huang had been haunted by dreams of endlessness. His tutors wrote that he spoke often of stars, of how they seemed to live forever while men aged and crumbled. He believed the heavens held the blueprint of eternity, that to rule well was to mirror the cosmos. When he looked up at the night sky, he saw not mystery, but architecture. And so, as a ruler, he began to build what he once dreamed, an empire that would reflect the heavens. Every road in China was measured to converge toward his capital, as though the world itself turned on his axis. Every written word was standardized, every coin minted with his seal. But even that wasn't enough. The living world, no matter how tightly ordered, was temporary. So he commissioned another, an eternal version, sculpted below ground where decay moved slowly, where sunlight could never unravel what he had made. This underground kingdom was not just a tomb. It was his vision of forever. Imagine the first moment his architects showed him the plans, vast scrolls unrolled across a lacquered table, the scent of ink and cedar rising into the air. At the center was a great chamber, the Emperor's palace, built directly beneath a man-made hill shaped like the sacred mountains of immortality. Radiating outward, corridors and chambers spread like arteries, each one symbolizing a province of his empire. Between them, rivers of mercury would flow, shimmering silver under torchlight, representing the Yangtze and Yellow rivers. When completed, the entire complex would become a cosmic mirror, the earth above reflected below, just as heaven reflected the Emperor. It wasn't enough to die and be remembered. He wanted to die and still rule. Listen closely. Even now, the air seems to hum faintly, as if the ghosts of artisans are still at work. Picture them centuries ago, thousands of laborers shaping clay under torchlight, their shadows twisting against the cavern walls. The air thick with smoke, the sharp tang of wet earth, and the hiss of molten bronze poured into molds. Some sculpted soldiers. Others carved miniature palaces, granaries, stables, and rivers. One record claims that the Emperor ordered replicas of his favorite mountains, cast in bronze and plated with silver. Another tells of a ceiling covered in pearls arranged to mimic the night sky, so that when the oil lamps were lit, the constellations would glimmer above his eternal throne. They said the Emperor wanted to sit surrounded by the universe itself, to look up and see the heavens, to look down and see the rivers of China flowing around him, forever alive, forever his. You pause, running your fingers along the clay wall. The glaze feels smooth and cold, still faintly slick from the damp air. Somewhere, water drips again, steady and slow. The sound is almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat. It's hard not to imagine the workers who built this place. They lived their entire lives underground, laboring in secrecy, forbidden to speak of what they saw. To them, this wasn't art. It was survival. They built eternity one handful of earth at a time, knowing they might never see the sun again. Because eternity in Qin Shi Huang's world demanded silence. When the work was done, it is said that many of those who built the tomb were sealed within it. Their voices stopped, their names erased. Their last breaths mingled with the dust that still hangs in this air. The Emperor's world was meant to be perfect. No leaks, no witnesses, no imperfections of mortal life. Only order. Only stillness. And so eternity began with death. Think of what that says about him. This man who ruled the world but could not bear its impermanence. To him, eternity wasn't peace, it was control. He could not allow chance or decay to exist, not even in the afterlife. Everything here was calculated: the flow of mercury, the orientation of the tomb's corridors, even the way air might circulate through the chambers. He wanted to breathe forever. He wanted his empire to breathe with him. That's the strangest thing about this place. For all its darkness, all its silence, it doesn't feel dead. There's an eerie vitality to it, a sense that it's still doing what it was built to do, preserve. The walls hold their shape. The faces of the soldiers still stare forward. The metals, though corroded, retain their glint. And the tomb itself, the great chamber said to lie beneath this complex, remains sealed. For 2,000 years, no one has dared open it. Scientists have tried to peer inside with radar and probes. What they found only deepened the mystery. The readings show a vast central hall nearly 400 feet wide, with strange magnetic patterns and unusually high mercury levels. Local legends claim the ground above the tomb kills vegetation, poisoned by the Emperor's rivers of quicksilver. Even today, some villagers say that when it rains, the puddles shimmer unnaturally. It's as if his dream of immortality still leaks through the soil. You reach the end of a long tunnel. The air grows colder, heavier. A faint breeze touches your face. Impossible, down here, and yet you feel it. Maybe it's only the movement of air displaced by the shifting earth, or maybe it's something else. The weight of centuries, exhaling. You imagine standing in the central chamber itself, surrounded by stars cast in glowing jewels and a floor rippling with mercury rivers. The Emperor seated at the center, his armor gilded, his hands resting on the arms of a throne carved from jade. In your mind's eye, you can almost hear him speak. "See what I have done," he whispers. "The world above will fade, but mine will not. I have built perfection, and perfection cannot die." There's pride in his voice, but also a trace of loneliness. Because what good is eternity when there is no one left to share it with? That's the cruel truth buried beneath the beauty of this place. Eternity, as Qin Shi Huang built it, was not a reward. It was a sentence, a frozen reflection of his own fear, sealed so tightly that even time could not breathe. You take a slow breath. The air tastes of stone, age, and something faintly metallic. You imagine the mercury rivers glinting just beyond the sealed walls, still flowing after millennia. Scientists say the tomb might collapse if opened, that the mercury alone would poison anyone who stepped inside. And so it remains untouched, a paradox of preservation. To see it would destroy it. To protect it means never to look. The Emperor would have approved of that. He wanted mystery. He wanted the living world to wonder what he had built. In that sense, his immortality is complete. 2,000 years later, the living still whisper his name. The curious still descend into his shadow, just as you are doing now, still trying to glimpse the mind that thought it could trap eternity in clay and mercury. You look once more at the tunnel stretching behind you, where the terracotta soldiers stand in their endless ranks. Each one, in its way, a fragment of his vision. Eternity, he believed, was not a span of time. It was a condition. A state of stillness so perfect it could never decay. A kingdom where nothing changes, nothing dies, and nothing truly lives. You turn forward again. The walls seem to close in slightly, the air pressing against you. You realize this entire descent has been gradual, almost imperceptible. Step by step, the ground has sloped downward, drawing you deeper into the Emperor's dream. And then, far ahead you see it, a faint glimmer, gold and silver mixed like dawn reflected in water. You can't tell if it's real or a trick of your eyes. Maybe it's just the imagination catching its own reflection in the dark. But it feels like a threshold. A place where myth and memory merge. The hum beneath your feet grows stronger, resonant, almost like the pulse of the earth itself. You pause, heart steady, breath slow. Above you, the world continues its endless cycle of days and nights. Down here, there is only the idea of forever. You realize that Qin Shi Huang's vision of eternity was never about immortality at all. It was about permanence. About conquering change, trapping time itself within walls of clay and metal. And in a way, he succeeded. The emperor who refused to die has become the emperor who cannot fade. Even now, the soldiers stand at attention. The rivers still flow beneath the soil. The stars above his chamber still shine in the dark where no eyes can see them. You step closer to that faint glow ahead. The tunnel narrows. The air grows warmer. Something, whether gas or imagination, seems to whisper softly against your ear, the sound almost like a sigh. The story isn't ending. It's deepening. Because if this is his vision of eternity, then what lies ahead is the forge of it, the place where eternity itself was shaped by human hands. You take another step forward, into the warmth, into the breath of the past, and feel the earth shift beneath you like it's welcoming you deeper still. You take another step forward. The tunnel opens into a wider chamber, and suddenly the air changes. It's warmer here, dense with the faint scent of ash and something sharper, burned clay. You can almost hear it, though there's nothing but silence now, the low roar of ancient furnaces, the rhythmic thud of hammers shaping the earth into form. The Emperor's vision, the eternal empire you've been walking through, wasn't conjured by spirits or alchemists. It was born from fire, sweat, and thousands of human hands. Here, where the air still tastes faintly of smoke, the dream of immortality was forged. Imagine it, the fields above alive with motion 2,000 years ago, the earth split open to reveal furnaces the size of houses. Kilns built from rammed clay, their mouths glowing orange through the night. The clang of bronze tools, the hiss of water cooling fresh molds. Sparks rising into the dusk like captured stars. The work never stopped, not for sun, not for sleep. Tens of thousands of laborers, artisans, prisoners, conscripts, moved like shadows across the valley. Some carried baskets of clay from nearby pits, others shaped limbs, torsos, armor plates. Each fragment would later be joined to form the body of a soldier. Day by day, piece by piece, the Emperor's army took shape. You can almost hear the foreman's voice echoing in the distance, calling through the smoke. "More water! More wood for the fires!" The language of creation was not gentle, it was shouted, cracked, urgent. And among the workers there must have been whispers. Because even then, even in the heart of the Empire's power, how could they not feel the strangeness of what they were building? An army that would never march. Warriors that would never die. The sculptors knew they were making something holy and terrible, a shadow army for a god-king who refused to yield to time. You kneel, brushing your fingers through the dirt. It's speckled with something black, tiny fragments of fired clay, baked long ago. Each one could have come from a hand, a face, a weapon. Each one, a trace of the moment when Earth first met flame and became eternal. The process was meticulous. The artisans began with the bodies, hollow, coiled from long ropes of clay. Legs were molded separately, thick and steady, designed to bear the weight of centuries. The torsos came next, built from layers of clay smoothed by damp palms and wooden paddles. Arms were attached afterward, the seams hidden beneath sculpted folds of armor. And then came the heads, the most human, the most fragile part of all. No two were alike. Some have high cheekbones and narrow eyes, others have square jaws and deep-set brows. You can still see the individual strokes of the sculptor's knife. the delicate curve of a lip, the faint crease of concentration on a brow. Each face took days, sometimes weeks. Because these weren't mere statues, they were portraits. Some believe the artisans modeled them after real soldiers of the Qin army, men who once stood on battlefields, who died believing they would live forever through the clay versions of themselves. Others think the faces came from the sculptor's own imaginations, a secret rebellion hidden in artistry, ordinary people giving their own features to the emperor's immortal army. A subtle way to say, we, too, will not be forgotten. Walk further into the chamber and you can almost see them, the rows of artisans crouched beside their work. Their hands are white with dust, their faces lit orange by the furnace glow. They work in silence broken only by the crack of wood in the kilns. Somewhere, a young apprentice stirs a vat of slip, a thin clay paste used to bind the joints. The older craftsmen move with careful precision, their gestures practiced and almost sacred. One man carves the intricate patterns of armor scales, each plate perfectly overlapping. Another shapes the folds of a tunic, so fine you can almost imagine the fabric shifting in an unseen breeze. The attention to detail is obsessive. Even the soles of the soldiers' boots bear tread marks, though no one will ever see them. That's the heart of Qin craftsmanship, perfection, even in what will remain hidden. Above ground, the emperor's officials watch from shaded pavilions. They record quotas and tally progress on bamboo slips. Every week, new teams arrive, fresh hands, fresh backs, fresh fear. Because no one knows what fate awaits when the work is done. Rumors spread like smoke through the camps, that once the tomb is complete, no one will be allowed to leave. That eternity demands silence. Still, they keep building. You close your eyes, and for a moment you can feel the heat. Imagine standing beside one of those great kilns, the walls trembling with the pulse of the fire inside. Workers feed it day and night with bundles of pine wood and straw. The air grows so hot it shimmers, warping the edges of the world. When the temperature reaches its peak, over 1,000 degrees, the air fills with the faint wail of clay shrinking, hardening, finding its final shape. Inside the kiln, the soldiers are being born. When the fires cool days later, the sculptors break open the kiln mouths. The air rushes in, carrying with it the smell of burnt clay and pine resin. They brush away the soot and ash, revealing figures standing in rows like men waking from sleep. The clay glows faintly red, as if still alive. And then comes color. Most people don't realize that the Terracotta Army was never meant to be gray. Each figure was painted in dazzling hues: vermilion, turquoise, indigo, black. The faces were flesh-toned, the lips red, the armor detailed with geometric patterns and bronze accents. Under the flicker of lamplight, the army would have seemed alive, mid-breath, ready to move. That illusion lasted for 2 millennia, until the day the first soldier was unearthed. Within minutes of exposure, the ancient pigments cracked and faded, disintegrating into dust. The color that once made them lifelike was swallowed again by time. But here, in your mind, they still stand bright as dawn. Every detail of their construction followed ritual precision. The artisans were organized in ranks, just like the soldiers they sculpted. Teams specialized in specific parts: heads, hands, torsos, armor, weapons. Overseers inspected each piece before it was approved. Any imperfection could mean punishment, even death. Yet within that fear there was art. The workers left fingerprints pressed into the clay, tiny spirals of individuality that still cling to the figures today. Thousands of years later, archaeologists would find them, traces of the human hands that built eternity. It's a strange thought, isn't it? That even under tyranny, creation endures. That beauty can bloom in the service of power, and yet outlive it. Move closer now. Imagine stepping through the workshop's final hall, where the finished warriors wait. Hundreds of them line the floor, standing in formation. Some hold spears tipped with real bronze, others draw chariots pulled by clay horses. The air shimmers with heat, the fires outside roar. The master sculptor walks among them with a bronze mirror in his hands, inspecting each soldier's reflection. He adjusts a helmet here, smooths a cheek there. Behind him, a younger apprentice whispers, unable to contain his awe. "They look alive," he says. The master does not smile. "That is the point," he replies softly. When the emperor comes to see them, the workshop falls into silence. His procession enters like a storm of silk and bronze. The soldiers stand waiting, perfectly still. The emperor steps closer, his eyes gleaming in the firelight. He circles one of the figures, his fingers brushing the clay cheek. "Good," he murmurs. "They will remember me." He doesn't mean the sculptors. He means the future. You can almost feel the pride and terror in that moment, the craftsman bowing low, the emperor's shadow stretching across the glowing floor. To them, this was more than work. It was a form of worship. Every statue was a prayer written in earth, "May the emperor never die." And yet, in the cracks of those prayers, humanity slipped through. The sculptors gave each soldier a face that felt real, not divine. They carved laughter lines, furrowed brows, imperfections. They left fingerprints. In doing so, they unknowingly defied the very idea of eternity. They made something that lived. That's the irony buried here. The emperor wanted perfection, but his artisans gave him life instead. As you move deeper into the chamber, the echoes of their labor fade again, replaced by stillness. The fires have long gone cold. The hammers silent. Yet their ghosts linger in every detail, the curve of a jaw, the grip of a clay hand. You begin to realize that this army was not built for the afterlife alone. It was built for us, for the living who would one day uncover it, who would stand here and feel the pulse of human hands across 2,000 years. The emperor sought eternity through domination. His artisans found it through creation. Both succeeded. And both are still here, side by side in the silence of the earth. You take one last look at the faces around you. They stare forward, eternal sentinels molded from the same soil that now holds your feet. The light of your torch flickers across their armor, and for a heartbeat, it seems they shift slightly, as if the fire remembers them, and they remember the fire. Then the light steadies again, and they return to stillness. You exhale slowly, the sound almost reverent. Ahead, another tunnel yawns open, sloping downward once more. The scent of clay fades, replaced by the cold breath of deeper stone. You follow it step by step, leaving the furnace chambers behind. The air grows quieter, darker. The path narrows to a single archway, carved with faint symbols now half erased by time. And as you pass beneath it, the whisper of the past seems to murmur again. The army is ready. Ahead lies the next world, the hidden city of the dead, where not only warriors, but musicians, dancers, and servants await their emperor's eternal command. And so you walk on, deeper still, where the silence begins to hum once more. The tunnel narrows again, and your torchlight trembles against the walls, smooth clay here, streaked with faint traces of soot and age. The air smells different now, faintly sweet, like damp soil after rain. Somewhere ahead, there's the hollow hush of a wider chamber, and as you step into it, the silence opens like a held breath released. You've entered another part of the Emperor's buried world, and at first glance, it seems much the same as before, soldiers standing in formation, armor gleaming faintly in the half-light. But as your eyes adjust, something shifts. You notice their faces. These are not the polished ranks of idealized warriors you saw before. These faces are rougher, stranger, more human. Some look proud. Others weary. One even seems to smile, just barely, a ghost of humor lingering across 2,000 years. Another stares ahead with the hollow exhaustion of someone who's seen too much. No two are the same. And the longer you look, the more you feel as if you're standing not among statues, but among memories. Each soldier is a story carved in silence. A man who once lived, perhaps, or perhaps someone imagined into being by the hands that made him. Either way, they're not empty forms. They're portraits of forgotten souls. Archaeologists will tell you that the faces were built from molds, about 10 basic templates for the head and features, combined and altered to create variety. Ears reshaped, noses resculpted, expressions changed by a single stroke of a blade. But when you look at them now, that explanation feels too neat, too mechanical. There's something else here, something the science can't quite measure: personality. One man's eyes are slightly downturned, his lips pressed tight in quiet thought. Another's cheeks are full, his brow furrowed, a trace of impatience in his stance. There's a soldier with a long, elegant face, his chin lifted proudly, as if he's still waiting for his name to be called. And beside him stands one whose expression is gentler, more resigned, his shoulders just barely slouched, as though he knows the war is already over. They were meant to be eternal guards, but somewhere in the making, they became people again. You walk among them slowly, the torch casting thin bands of light that dance across their eyes. Each one catches the glow differently, some bright and sharp, others dull and hollow. You can almost imagine the scene when they were first unveiled to the Emperor, rows upon rows of faces, all staring forward, their painted eyes alive with color, their armor gleaming with bronze and lacquer. It must have been breathtaking. And terrifying. Because how does one man stand before 10,000 silent versions of humanity, and not feel the weight of all that life gazing back? Maybe Qin Shi Huang didn't see them as people at all. To him, perhaps they were extensions of his own will, reflections of his perfect order. But the artisans who shaped them must have seen something different. When you carve a face, you can't help but know it. You start with the curve of the jaw, the hollow of the cheek, the gentle rise of the brow. You spend hours with it, adjusting, refining. At some point, it begins to look back at you. And maybe, in those moments, the artisans gave something of themselves to the clay. A father's patience. A young man's pride. A woman's memory of her husband gone to war. The emperor wanted soldiers, but the sculptors gave him souls. You stop before one particular figure, a middle-ranked officer, judging by the detail of his armor. His lips are parted slightly, as though he's about to speak. There's a small chip at the corner of his eye, a scar in the clay where time itself took a breath. You tilt your torch, and the shadows deepen in his gaze. For an instant, he looks startlingly alive. You wonder who he was. Maybe no one. Maybe everyone. Some historians believe these faces were modeled after real soldiers who served under the emperor's rule. The sculptors may have used the living men as models, capturing their likeness before the army marched into history. If so, then these are portraits not just of the emperor's eternal guard, but of the very men who fought to create his empire, reborn in earth, condemned to stand forever. Others think it was a quiet act of rebellion. That the artisans, forbidden to sign their work, left their identities in the faces themselves, tiny acts of defiance baked into clay. They couldn't carve their names, so they carved their features instead. The result, an army of individuals in a world that worshipped uniformity. It's strange how presence lingers. In the quiet, you start to sense it, the faint impression of their breath, the rhythm of their imagined hearts. They stand shoulder to shoulder, yet each is solitary, bound in his own eternity. One seems ready to speak. Another looks like he's listening. You half expect to hear the clatter of bronze armor, the rustle of cloth. But there's only the faint sound of air moving between their ranks, a whisper of centuries. Perhaps that's what the artisans intended, not just an army, but a conversation across time. You crouch again, tracing the outline of a broken hand resting near the base of a soldier's leg. The fingers are long, carefully shaped. Someone once spent hours perfecting that hand, knowing full well it would never move. There's tenderness in it, a detail no emperor demanded. And you think of all the unnamed people who made this place. Thousands of workers, craftsmen, and laborers who toiled in silence, whose own faces have long since turned to dust. They are gone, but their fingerprints remain pressed into the clay they left behind. Their lives were brief, their names erased, but their touch endures. Every face here, every eye, every line of a jaw, is a monument to the forgotten. There's a kind of mercy in that thought, isn't there? That even under a ruler who sought to erase individuality, it somehow survived. The emperor wanted obedience, the artisans left humanity. And here you are, standing among them, proof that they succeeded. Because you're not thinking about the emperor anymore. You're thinking about the people. The man who shaped this soldier's lips to almost smile. The woman who mixed the pigment that once colored his eyes. The young apprentice who dropped a chisel and froze, waiting for punishment that never came. They're all here, in the silence, their stories suspended in clay. You lift your torch higher. The light flares, catching the contours of dozens, hundreds, of faces stretching into the dark. A sea of humanity carved from earth, staring out of eternity. Some are weathered, cracked, half buried in soil. Others stand nearly untouched, their expressions preserved as though they were finished yesterday. You realize you could spend a lifetime studying them and still never find the same face twice. Each one is a reminder that the past was not faceless. History is not written only by kings, but by hands. And yet there's a sorrow in their stillness too. Because whatever these men were, soldiers, servants, symbols, they are trapped here. Frozen mid-breath, mid-thought, mid-life. The emperor may have wanted to cheat death, but in doing so, he captured it perfectly, the stillness, the absence, the endless waiting. You step closer to another figure, a bearded general with a calm expression. His eyes are wide and clear, but there's a faint tilt to his mouth, almost melancholic. If you could hear his thoughts, maybe he would say, "We were meant to guard him forever. And now we guard only dust." The silence answers, steady and absolute. Still, their presence is not grim. There's a quiet dignity to them, a beauty that transcends their purpose. They were built to serve, but they'd become something greater, witnesses to time. The emperor's name has turned to legend, his palaces to ruin, but these faces endure. They have outlived every dynasty, every war, every empire that rose and fell above them. Perhaps that's the final irony of Qin Shi Huang's dream. He built an army to preserve his immortality, but in the end, it was the artisans, the nameless ones, who achieved it. Their work still breathes, centuries after the emperor's last breath turned cold. You take a slow breath. The air tastes of dust and age, but there's life in it somehow, faint, invisible, eternal. You turn, letting your light sweep once more across the faces surrounding you. For a moment, it feels like they're looking back, their silence almost companionable. And maybe, in a way, they are. You begin to move again, the sound of your footsteps echoing softly. The soldiers fade into the dark behind you, their ranks dissolving into shadow. Ahead, a new passage yawns open, descending deeper still. The air grows cooler, and you catch a hint of something metallic, the smell of bronze and mercury mingled with damp earth. The whisper of the past follows you, the faint sound of chisels, the imagined laughter of artisans long gone. You realize that this is how memory works, layer by layer, face by face, carved from time and kept alive by wonder. You look once more over your shoulder at the soldiers standing watch in the dark, their faces solemn and unyielding. They are forgotten only if we stop looking. And with that, you turn forward again, into the descending dark, toward the next chamber, where the world below will reveal what else the Emperor's eternity required. The tunnel bends downward again, the air cooling until each breath feels heavier than the last. Behind you, the silent army recedes into the dark, thousands of clay eyes fading back into their long vigil. Ahead, the light from your torch brushes the walls, and for the first time, you see the faint glimmer of bronze embedded in the earth. A fragment of a wheel's spoke. A shattered spear tip. The residue of motion frozen mid-moment. You are descending into what the archaeologists call the lower chambers. But that phrase doesn't do justice to what lies here. This is no simple tomb. This is a buried civilization. A city of the dead, built to mirror the living world in every detail. A world below the world. At first, there is only darkness and silence. Then, as you move deeper, shapes begin to form. A chariot, its wooden frame long rotted away but the bronze fittings still gleaming faintly, preserved by the soil. 2 horses stand before it, carved from terracotta, their eyes wide and nostrils flared, as though still sensing the command to charge. The reins, made of bronze wire, are twisted in a way that suggests motion frozen mid-gallop. They were built to carry the emperor through eternity. Not into battle, but into ceremony, his eternal procession through the underworld. Move further, and the scene changes. The soldiers are gone now, replaced by figures in softer postures. Musicians, dancers, servants. The emperor did not travel to death alone. He brought with him the entire echo of his empire. Here stands a man holding a bronze bell, his hand raised as though waiting for a conductor's cue. Nearby, a kneeling figure grips a zither carved from clay, its strings long vanished but the finger position still perfect. The air feels almost reverent, as if some unheard song still hums faintly through the centuries. You pause, closing your eyes. If you listen closely, you can almost hear it, the distant strains of an invisible orchestra, the steady rhythm of drums, the sigh of flutes. Music written not for mortal ears, but for the spirit of the emperor himself, to soothe his endless rest. This was the heart of Qin Shi Huang's vision, that death should be indistinguishable from life. That his afterworld should contain everything the living world offered: beauty, service, loyalty, order. The artisans obeyed. They built stables filled with clay horses, their muscles rippling beneath sculpted hides. They built acrobats caught mid-performance, dancers with limbs curved in motion, their faces serene. There were even figurines of officials, scribes, cooks, servants, each one posed at their eternal task. A man bending to pour wine. Another kneeling to wash the emperor's feet. A woman frozen mid-bow, a tray balanced on her hands. Even the smallest details were preserved, the folds in their robes, the knots of their hair, the faint impressions of stitching on their clay garments. Every gesture meant to serve the same purpose, to recreate, perfectly, the world that the emperor ruled. And yet, as you walk among them, there's something unsettling about it. Perfection without life feels hollow. The servants' faces are calm, but their eyes, those unblinking, painted eyes, seem filled with quiet resignation. Its beauty turns static, motion caught in amber. You realize that for all its artistry, this underground world is not a celebration of life, but its imitation. A theater where the actors never move, performing forever for an audience of one who no longer breathes. It's magnificent. And deeply lonely. You reach another chamber, smaller and darker. Here, the air is heavier, tinged with the faint metallic scent of bronze and something else, bitumen, perhaps, or the residue of ancient lacquer. In the glow of your torch, a row of bronze birds glints softly. Cranes and swans, their necks arched, their wings half spread. They were placed near an artificial riverbed lined with pebbles and sand. This, archaeologists say, was the emperor's garden, a miniature recreation of the imperial lakes and parks above. You can picture it as it must have looked when new, the floor shimmering with flowing mercury, reflecting the painted sky above. Bronze birds resting on its banks, clay fish caught mid-leap, trees molded from metal and silk. The emperor walking among them in spirit, his robes gliding across the mirrored surface. To him, this was paradise. A kingdom perfected. But to you, standing here centuries later, it feels more like a dream turned cold, a still life painted in death. Everywhere you look, the lines between devotion and fear blur. The artisans who built this world were not merely craftsmen. They were captives of the emperor's will. Some came willingly, seduced by the promise of immortality through art. Others were prisoners, condemned to labor in darkness. And when their work was done, when every chamber was filled, every chariot built, every face painted, they were silenced. The records hint at mass burials near the tomb site. Thousands of lives swallowed so that the Emperor's secrets would remain untouched. Their final task was to seal the world they'd created. And then, the earth closed over them. You take another step and the floor shifts slightly beneath your boots. A hollow sound, as though space still lies beneath your feet. Perhaps there are more chambers still undiscovered, more worlds waiting in the dark. Scientists believe that less than a quarter of the Emperor's necropolis has been excavated. The rest remains sealed by time, protected by superstition and fear of the mercury that seeps through the soil like the Emperor's lingering breath. They say his actual tomb lies at the center, beneath a great mound of earth, untouched since the day it was sealed. A palace of the dead, its ceiling studded with gems arranged as constellations, its rivers flowing with liquid silver. No one has dared open it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. You pause beneath a low archway, feeling the weight of 2,000 years pressing down from above. The thought strikes you that every generation since the Emperor's time has been just a ripple on the surface of this deeper stillness. Empires have risen and fallen, dynasties replaced, wars fought, inventions made, and yet down here, nothing has changed. The clay soldiers still stand in their ranks. The dancers still bow. The horses still strain against invisible reins. The musicians still raise their hands, waiting for a cue that will never come. The Emperor's world endures, but it does not live. And maybe that was always the point. You turn your torch slowly across the chamber, watching the reflections glint off bronze and clay. The light catches the faint shimmer of something metallic in a crack of the wall. Mercury, perhaps, seeping upward through the centuries. It quivers slightly, trembling like liquid light. You step closer and see your reflection in it, blurred, distorted. For a moment you look like one of them, half real, half shadow, a fleeting soul glimpsed in the mirror of eternity. You blink, and it's gone. You move again, following the passage that leads onward. The air grows cooler, the silence more profound. You realize that this descent has carried you far below the level of the earth, into the deepest layer of the Emperor's dream. This is where his idea of immortality begins to shift from grandeur to something more desperate. The further you go, the clearer it becomes. This world was not built out of serenity, but fear. A man terrified of the void, building an empire of clay to convince himself that the void did not exist. And yet, standing here, you feel almost sorry for him. Because what he made is both astonishing and tragic, a monument not to life, but to the refusal to let it go. You pass a final alcove where two statues stand apart from the rest, a pair of court attendants, smaller than the soldiers but crafted with the same care. One holds a scroll, the other carries a sealed box. Their expressions are calm, almost compassionate, as if they understand something their emperor never could. Perhaps they were meant to symbolize wisdom and remembrance, the guardians of knowledge and memory. Perhaps they are the only ones who know the true cost of this buried empire. You lower your torch slightly, bow your head, and for a brief, strange moment, you feel you should whisper a thank you. Not to the emperor, but to the unknown hands that shaped all of this. Because through their labor, history still breathes. As you walk toward the next passage, the sound of your footsteps fades into the same steady rhythm that has filled this earth since it was sealed. The world above hums with motion, but here, in the depths, time stands perfectly still. You look back one last time. The chariots, the dancers, the silent musicians, the servants bent in eternal devotion, the clay birds that will never fly. An entire civilization captured in its final breath, beautiful, haunting, and heartbreakingly human. And ahead of you, the path descends again. The darkness grows denser, pressing close like the folds of a curtain. Somewhere beyond it lies the heart of the tomb, the Emperor's final chamber, the source of all this wonder and fear. You steady your breath, lift your torch, and step forward once more into the waiting dark. The air ahead grows colder, the tunnel narrower. Your torch sputters once, then steadies again, its flame dancing against the stone like a nervous heart. You can smell something faint and strange: old oil, scorched earth, perhaps even the memory of smoke that hasn't risen in 2,000 years. The silence feels thicker here, as though you're walking into a place that knows it should not be disturbed. The further you go, the more you feel it. This part of the Emperor's underground empire is different. The beauty of the world above, the soldiers, the dancers, the shimmering rivers of mercury, gives way to something darker. The air carries weight, not just of time, but of what was buried here deliberately. This is the place where Qin Shi Huang's vision demanded its final payment. The place of secrets and sacrifice. You reach a fork in the tunnel, each path slanting deeper, one to the left and one to the right. Both vanish into pitch black. You stand between them, the silence almost humming. The air is damp, the soil beneath your boots soft, as if it remembers the movement of many feet. You choose the right-hand path, tracing the faint carvings on the wall as you go, simple marks, vertical lines, not decorations but tallies. Counting. They were carved by workers, perhaps, marks of labor, or of days spent underground. Some end abruptly, unfinished, as if their makers were taken before they could add another stroke. Your torchlight catches something ahead, a wooden beam, blackened with age, set into the wall. The grain is warped, the wood petrified. Beside it, a cluster of bronze tools lies half buried in the dirt. Chisels, hammers, a shovel blade snapped clean through the middle. There's a faint glint of something else, too. You crouch and brush the soil away with your fingertips. Teeth. Human teeth. Just a few, pale and small, caught in the clay like fossils of a forgotten truth. For centuries, people have whispered about what happened when the Emperor's tomb was complete. That when the last brick was sealed, the last torch extinguished, none of the workers ever returned to the surface. The men who shaped eternity were entombed within it. Was it myth? Or was it law? The ancient historian Sima Qian wrote of it with chilling precision, that after construction was finished, the inner gates were locked, trapping the artisans inside so the secrets of the tomb would never escape. The lamps were extinguished. The air went still, and silence became the final guardian of the Emperor's dream. Here, standing in the dark, it feels believable. Too believable. Imagine that moment. The workers, exhausted from years of labor, standing in the final chamber as the last stones were lowered into place. Perhaps they didn't know. Perhaps they thought they would be released once their task was done. And then, as the sound of sealing echoed through the corridors, they realized this was their reward. The torches dimmed. The air thinned. The tunnels fell silent except for their breathing, their fists pounding on the walls. The Emperor's officials above turned their backs, the last shafts of daylight vanishing as the gates closed. And down here, the living became ghosts before their hearts stopped beating. You lift your torch and look at the walls again. In some places, the clay looks disturbed, like it was clawed at. The marks are faint, softened by centuries, but you can still see the desperate arcs of human hands. They reach upward, as if searching for air, for light, for mercy. The Emperor built this world to last forever. But the price of forever was silence. And silence must be paid for in blood. Step further, and the tunnel widens again. A vast hollow opens before you, its ceiling low, its floor uneven. You realize what you're standing among only gradually: bones. Not skeletons, exactly, but the fragments of many lives, femurs, ribs, skulls split cleanly in half. Thousands of them, tangled together in layers. The archaeologists who explored parts of this site called them construction remains. But the truth is more haunting. These were the hands that built the Emperor's immortality, and they were buried within it. The workers who carried clay and bronze, the potters who molded the soldiers' faces, the women who mixed the pigments. When their work was done, they became part of the foundation. Human mortar sealing the Emperor's dream. You stand very still. The torch crackles softly, its flame reflected in the curves of ancient bone. No sound. No movement. Just the weight of what it took to make eternity possible. It wasn't just the laborers. Some records say that when the emperor died, his concubines were ordered to follow him, alive, into the tomb. They were dressed in silk, adorned with jewels, and led into the chambers beneath the earth. Some went willingly, believing they were joining him in paradise. Others wept. When the doors closed behind them, the air filled with their prayers, and then, nothing. The emperor's afterlife was not meant to be lonely. It was meant to be absolute. You move through the chamber slowly, careful where you step. The bones have become part of the earth itself, their surfaces stained dark by time. Among them, you spot a fragment of pottery, decorated, unlike the soldier's armor. A woman's hairpin, perhaps, still embedded in the soil. A small object of beauty, lost in the dark. And suddenly you realize this wasn't just a tomb built by command. It was a sacrifice disguised as architecture. Every curve of these tunnels, every sculpted face, every shimmer of mercury above the emperor's palace was bought with life. It was the final offering to a man who believed that death was a thing he could conquer if he only built high enough, deep enough, wide enough. But in building his eternity, he consumed the world around him. You lift your torch toward the ceiling. The light dances across blackened beams, the remnants of scaffolds used during construction. Some are warped, almost melted. Archaeologists discovered traces of resin and oil here, indications that the chambers were once sealed with molten metal, a final reinforcement to make escape impossible. There are also traces of ash and carbon near the entrances. Perhaps the tunnels were burned after the workers were sealed inside, to consume what breath remained. The emperor's afterlife was to be perfect, unspoiled by decay or rebellion. In his mind, even the whisper of imperfection was a threat. And so, he silenced everything. It's strange to think that above you, the world moved on. Dynasties rose, fell, were forgotten. Earthquakes shook these chambers but did not destroy them. Floods came and went. The soil shifted. Yet this place endured, untouched, locked tight by death's own hand. No one disturbed it until that day in 1974 when the farmers digging a well struck the first soldier's head. Imagine what it must have felt like to unearth this silence, to release a breath held for 2,000 years. The world gasped, and the emperor's secret exhaled back. You kneel again, pressing your palm lightly to the soil. It's cold, dry, but alive somehow, vibrating faintly with the hum of what was left here. The weight of ambition, fear, and faith, all compressed into this single layer of earth. The workers may be gone, their names erased, their bones scattered, but their story lingers. It's written in the air, in the hush of these tunnels, in the artistry that still defies decay. They gave their lives to build eternity. And in a way, they succeeded. Their emperor achieved the immortality he sought, but not the way he imagined. His name endures not through divine ascension, but through the labor of the forgotten. And theirs endures through him. You rise slowly. The torchlight flickers across the curve of the tunnel ahead. You can see the faint shimmer of moisture on the walls, and deeper in the passage, something metallic glints. The sound changes too, the faintest echo, as if the space beyond is vast. You've reached the edge of the inner complex, where rumor turns to mystery. Somewhere beyond these walls lies the sealed palace, the emperor's final chamber, untouched and deadly, its air still poisoned by mercury, its treasures still hidden in the dark. No one alive has seen it. No human eyes have looked upon its rivers, its constellations, its sleeping emperor and his armor of gold. And maybe that's for the best. Because the deeper you go, the clearer it becomes. This is not a monument to life everlasting. It's a warning written in stone. A reminder that the pursuit of eternity always demands a sacrifice. You turn your torch toward the way forward. The path is steep now, carved directly into the bedrock, the air sharper and colder than before. Somewhere behind you, the echoes of unseen steps seem to follow, a trick of sound, or memory refusing to stay still. You glance back once, toward the darkness where the bones lie hidden. You whisper something, maybe a word, maybe only breath, and then keep moving. The walls narrow, the flame shivers, and the air begins to taste faintly of metal and stone. You can feel the heart of the tomb ahead now, pulsing in the silence. And as you descend into that next layer of darkness, you realize that you're no longer walking through the Emperor's kingdom. You're walking through the cost of it. The tunnel narrows until you must duck to pass beneath the low arch of stone. The air has changed again, drier, sharper, edged with the faint tang of metal and something else beneath it, a scent you can't quite name. Not rot, not dust. It's colder than either of those. It smells alive. The faint shimmer of mercury hangs here, invisible, but you can feel it in your throat, like breathing the memory of lightning. You're standing at the edge of the Emperor's heart, the chamber that has remained sealed longer than any palace above the earth. For 2,000 years, no one has entered this place. It waits beneath its mountain of soil, a buried cosmos built for one man's eternity. This is the Emperor's mausoleum. The path widens as you move forward, and your torch catches the glint of something pale and granular on the floor, quartz dust. The ancient texts say the builders used it to mark sacred boundaries. It was spread across the ground to reflect lamplight, creating the illusion of stars beneath one's feet. As your boots stir it, tiny particles dance like frozen starlight. The air hums faintly in your ears. Or maybe that's only the pressure of history pressing closer. The deeper you go, the more you feel it. This is not just a tomb. It's a universe. Imagine it as it must have been the day the last torch went out. A vast chamber carved directly into the bedrock, the ceiling arched high enough to swallow sound. Above, thousands of pearls and precious stones set into the roof to mimic constellations. The Great Bear, Orion, the Milky Way, all glittering faintly under oil lamps. The floor below glowed with rivers of mercury winding through miniature mountains of bronze and jade, flowing through valleys that mirrored the real geography of China. The Emperor's empire reflected in miniature, alive and eternal. At its center stood the Palace of Death itself, a chamber of gold and stone where Qin Shi Huang's coffin rested, surrounded by treasures so vast they defied imagination. Every description of it reads like myth, yet the science has proven much of it true. The earth above this site is laced with unnaturally high mercury levels. The shape of the chamber matches what was described by Xi'an, the historian who lived barely a century after the emperor's death. And radar imaging has revealed voids beneath the mound, symmetrical, massive, and untouched. So the myths may have been right all along. Even now, beneath hundreds of feet of earth, that palace still breathes its poisonous air. The rivers still shimmer. The stars still shine unseen. You imagine the emperor lying there in the center of it all, wrapped in silks that time has turned to dust. His armor gilded, his face painted for eternity. The body of a man who once ruled the world, preserved in the heart of a kingdom that no one dared enter. The silence surrounding him would be absolute. Perfect stillness, perfect order. This was how he wanted to exist forever, untouched, unchanging, sovereign even in death. But that desire, the hunger to remain, is never gentle. Look closely at the murals painted along the walls of this antechamber. Faint lines remain, their pigments long gone, but the outlines survive. Scenes of the world above, mountains, clouds, rivers, the imperial palace, servants carrying banners, all circling toward the center where the emperor lies. Everything converges upon him, even the heavens. He didn't build a resting place. He built a cosmos with himself as its axis. And yet, even in this perfection, decay finds its way. The scientists who study this place say that gases leak slowly upward from the sealed tomb. That the pressure within shifts when the air above changes. That somewhere in the darkness below, the rivers might still flow, not fast, but in a slow metallic pulse, as if the emperor's veins themselves were filled with mercury. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear it. A faint, low trickle echoing through the rock, a whisper of liquid silver running through the veins of the earth. The people who built this believed those rivers would carry his soul safely through the underworld, guiding him to his rightful place among the gods. But mercury, as we know now, is poison. A beautiful death disguised as immortality. So perhaps those shimmering streams are not rivers of eternity after all. Perhaps they are the emperor's last breath, endlessly dissolving into the soil. You reach the inner gate. A great slab of stone, carved smooth and veined with streaks of pyrite that glint like gold. It's sealed with layers of hardened clay and resin, still slick to the touch even after millennia. A perfect barrier. The artisans who placed it there knew what they were sealing inside, not just their emperor, but the secret of his own undoing. To open it would mean to destroy it. To reveal it would mean to lose it forever. And so, generation after generation, the tomb has remained closed, not out of reverence alone, but out of fear. Archaeologists whisper that the chamber could collapse if disturbed. The mercury alone would kill any who entered. The ancient traps, mechanical crossbows said to be rigged across the entrance, might still lie in wait. A dead man's paranoia, preserved for eternity. You place your hand on the stone. It's cold, impossibly smooth, the chill biting into your skin. Somewhere beyond this wall lies the Emperor's dream in full, the perfect silence he wanted, bought with uncountable lives. And you realize that in this, he succeeded. 2,000 years have passed, and his voice still rules this underground world. Every face, every figure, every wall, each was shaped to echo his will. Even now you stand here, a stranger from another age, drawn down into his darkness, whispering his name. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. He wanted to be remembered forever. And he is. But perhaps not in the way he imagined. For the world above moved on. His empire fractured within years of his death. His dynasty burned, his palaces fell, his monuments crumbled. The great wall he began to build stretched on, yes, but not as a testament to him, only to the enduring will of a people far greater than one man's ambition. Yet down here, beneath the dust and centuries, he still reigns, quietly, invisibly. His palace of eternity untouched, sealed by the fear and awe of those who came after. It's strange, isn't it? He feared death so completely that he built a world to contain it. And now that world contains him instead. You raise your torch once more, and the flame flutters weakly against the stone. In that brief shimmer of light, you can almost see it, the faintest reflection, as if the wall itself were a mirror. The gleam bends and warps, forming the ghost of a face, not yours, but another's. For a heartbeat, the features seem regal, calm, eyes half closed. Then the image fades, swallowed by the stone. You step back. The silence closes in again. Perhaps it was nothing, just light, or imagination, or the play of minerals in the rock. But you can't help wondering if the Emperor's gaze still lingers here, watching every intruder, guarding his perfect stillness. It would be easy to pity him, this man who built eternity, and then vanished within it. But perhaps that's what he wanted, to exist not as flesh, but as legend. To become inseparable from the earth itself. If so, he succeeded completely. Because in the end, his story has outlasted his bones. His dream of permanence became history's greatest paradox. A tomb that cannot be opened because it's too well preserved, a secret that cannot be known because it still breathes poison. He sought immortality and achieved it, not through eternal life, but through eternal mystery. You stand there a long while, your torch burning lower, the shadows creeping closer around you. The air feels thicker now, like you're standing at the bottom of time itself. And then, in the stillness, you feel it, a subtle vibration beneath your feet. The ground hums faintly, a resonance from somewhere far below. Perhaps the mercury shifting, perhaps the echo of your own heartbeat reflected through stone. Or perhaps it's something older, deeper. The Emperor's silence answering you. You whisper into the dark, though you don't know why. Was it worth it? Of course, there's no reply. Only the quiet, endless sound of a world that refuses to die. You turn at last, retracing your steps toward the passage that brought you here. The quartz dust glows faintly under your fading light, each step scattering tiny stars beneath your feet. Behind you, the sealed chamber waits, untouched as it has always been, the Emperor still enthroned within his dream. You walk back through the narrowing tunnel, the air growing warmer, the hum of the earth fading to stillness. Above, the living world waits, the rustle of trees, the chatter of cities, the bright impermanence of life. But you carry something of the tomb with you now, an understanding that eternity is not peace. It is weight. It is silence so complete that even time must bow before it. And as you climb toward that distant glow, the first hint of daylight filtering faintly down the shaft, you feel it watching still, deep beneath your feet. The man who built a world to escape death, and in doing so, ensured that death would never quite escape him. His rivers of mercury still flow. His stars still burn unseen. His silence still endures. The Emperor's mausoleum remains sealed, as it always was, his final command obeyed by the earth itself. You keep walking through the narrow corridor, leaving behind the sealed gate that guards the Emperor's still heart. The air begins to change again, less suffocating, almost electric, as if charged with the residue of ancient alchemy. A thin sheen of moisture glistens on the walls. It catches your torchlight and shivers faintly, like breath frozen in mineral form. You can taste metal on your tongue, iron, bronze, and something sharper still. This is not simply part of the tomb anymore. This is where the dream of immortality took physical shape, where elements, each with their own power and danger, were turned into the Emperor's final vocabulary. Clay, bronze, mercury, and gold, his four pillars of eternity. And it begins, as it always does, with earth. Clay. The simplest material in the world. A thing for potters and farmers, for children playing in riverbeds. Yet here, it was divine. For the Emperor, clay was more than matter, it was transformation. The soil that held the dead could also hold life. It could be shaped, fired, and made eternal. He saw in it the cycle of existence, from dust to flesh, from flesh to dust, from dust again into form. When the first soldiers of terracotta were molded, they were not built only as guardians. They were the Emperor's philosophy made visible. Life reborn from the earth, impervious to decay. It's strange to think how many hands must have touched that clay, thousands, smoothing it, coiling it, pressing their fingerprints into the soft surface before the flames claimed it forever. The clay remembers them all. Each ridge of a thumbprint, each groove of a fingernail, ghosts within the skin of immortality. Even now, when archaeologists lift the fragments from the ground, they sometimes find a mark impressed in the surface, a swirl, a whirl, a name that can no longer be read. Those tiny spirals are the oldest signatures in China. The proof that eternity, no matter how vast, was built by human hands. The Emperor's clay army stands because the earth itself was his scripture. He believed that if he could command the soil, he could command death. Then came bronze, the second element of immortality. Bronze had ruled China long before the Qin dynasty, but under Qin Shi Huang, it became a new language of power. It was used not for ritual vessels or weapons of war, but for permanence. His alchemists believed that bronze carried the essence of transformation, a symbol of the eternal cycle of fire and rebirth. Every chariot axle, every spearhead, every sword unearthed from this tomb gleams with that dull, ghostly green that time gives to bronze. And yet they remain sharp. The edges have not dulled. When scientists examined them, they discovered something extraordinary. The ancient metallurgists had coated the bronze with a thin layer of chromium, an element unknown to modern chemistry until the 19th century. 2,000 years before the concept existed, the Emperor's artisans had invented a way to preserve metal from corrosion. It's almost poetic. The very weapons buried here, meant to defend the dead, still resist the decay that consumes everything else. Even rust, it seems, bends to the Emperor's will. Bronze's endurance, the echo of thunder solidified. It is the sound of empire forged into silence. But the third element, the one that truly defines the Emperor's obsession, was mercury. Mercury, quicksilver. The shimmering metal that moves like liquid glass. Beautiful, dangerous, impossible to hold. The alchemists who served Qin Shi Huang believed mercury contained the secret of eternal life. Its unending motion, its resistance to evaporation, its reflective glow, all seemed to defy the normal rules of matter. They drank it, mixed it into elixirs with jade powder and powdered gold, believing it would infuse the body with the vitality of the cosmos. The Emperor believed them. He swallowed it daily, even as it poisoned him. His veins thickened with metal, his lips grew pale, and his mind turned fevered. Yet he was certain he could feel its power, the shimmer of the divine inside him. And when his tomb was built, he ordered the same element that had promised him life to become the rivers of his afterlife. The builders poured mercury into the channels carved into the stone floor until they shone like living veins. Even now, 2,000 years later, the soil above the tomb bleeds mercury. The earth itself exudes his madness. Scientists call it contamination. But standing here, breathing the faint metallic air, you can't help but wonder if it's something else, if the Emperor's dream is still alive, still leaking into the world that forgot him. The irony is perfect. The substance that was meant to grant immortality became his poison. The rivers that were meant to preserve him now keep his tomb sealed, deadly and impenetrable. In seeking to conquer death, he immortalized it instead. And then there was gold. Gold, the most obvious of the eternal elements, but also the least alive. The emperors before him had loved gold for its purity, its resistance to tarnish, its untouchable perfection. Qin Shi Huang saw it differently. To him, gold was the sun itself, immortal fire frozen into form. He demanded that his tomb gleam with it, the fittings of his palace, the blades of his chariots, even the nails in the coffins of his servants. Gold does not rust. It does not rot. It endures when everything else fades. But it is also lifeless. Cold. A mirror that reflects beauty without ever possessing it. If mercury was his blood and clay his flesh, then gold was his skin, the armor that encased him in eternity. Yet even gold cannot stop time. The world changes around it. Empires fall. Language shifts. Belief becomes myth. And still gold sits silently, gleaming, saying nothing. Just as the emperor sits silently, deep beneath the soil, waiting for a dawn that will never come. Each of these elements, earth, metal, fire, and poison, formed the empire's final act of creation. Together they built not a resting place, but a machine for preserving memory. Clay gave the tomb its shape. Bronze gave it strength. Mercury gave it life. Gold gave it radiance. And yet what all of them share is this: none can move forward. They endure, yes, but only by standing still. That is the true nature of immortality, as Qin Shi Huang imagined it, not endless motion, but endless stillness. Not life without death, but life that cannot change. It is a paradox sculpted into stone. You pause, letting your torchlight glide along the walls. They shimmer faintly, their surfaces flecked with mica that catches the light like stars. The deeper you look, the more it seems those flecks begin to move, sliding just slightly beneath the surface, like a memory that refuses to fade. You begin to understand what the emperor sought. He didn't want life, not as we know it. He wanted permanence, the illusion that what he built could not be unmade. He wanted to become an element himself. Maybe that's exactly what happened. The earth took him back. The mercury sealed him. The bronze guarded him. The gold preserved his image. He became his own creation. You stand still for a moment, your torch crackling softly, the light bending through the faint shimmer in the air. It feels like standing inside a lung that has been holding its breath for centuries. And you can almost hear it again, that faint hum beneath your feet, the whisper of mercury rivers still moving in their endless loop. The Emperor's heart still beating, not with blood, but with liquid metal. You realize then that his immortality isn't in question. He achieved it, just not in the way he imagined. His body perished, but his dream became eternal. The materials he shaped, the clay, the bronze, the mercury, the gold, are still here, still working in concert, still telling his story to anyone who dares to listen. That's what immortality really is. Not the refusal to die, but the power to be remembered. You move forward again, the tunnel slowly widening into another chamber. The air is clearer here, less metallic, almost gentle. The walls are smoother, more natural, as though the earth itself has softened with time. The flicker of your torch touches what looks like an altar, a stone platform ringed with metal bowls. Inside them are traces of ash, the remains of burned herbs and crushed minerals. The ancient alchemists once stood here, mixing elixirs of life for the Emperor's pleasure, chanting incantations to fuse the elements of earth and heaven. They must have believed that what they were doing was sacred. That with each spark of the brazier, they were helping the Emperor step one pace closer to godhood. You reach out and touch the stone. It's warm, somehow, as if the fires that once burned here never fully died. The air hums again, a low note that seems to come from the rock itself. It's almost like a sigh, a sound of the elements remembering their purpose. And you, standing here, realize that every dream of immortality carries within it the echo of its own ending. Clay cracks. Bronze dulls. Mercury dissipates. Gold tarnishes under time's slow breath. But memory endures. And that, perhaps, is the one element the Emperor could never command but somehow achieved all the same. The torchlight gutters, almost gone now. Ahead, the tunnel slopes upward again, toward what feels like air, the faintest pull of oxygen, the suggestion of the world above. You take one last look back at the dim chamber behind you, where the elements gleam faintly in the half-dark, and it feels like watching the bones of a god glimmer beneath the surface of the earth. You whisper softly, unsure whether to the Emperor or to the centuries themselves. You did it. You lasted. Then you turn and climb. The sound of your own breath mingles with the heartbeat of the earth, steady, ancient, and endless. Because immortality, after all, is not a matter of living forever. It is a matter of never being forgotten. The slope ahead feels endless. Each step draws you closer to air, to light, to the echo of the living world above. The walls around you begin to change, less smooth, more fractured, as if the earth itself has begun to breathe again. There's a faint current now, a suggestion of wind moving through narrow spaces. You can smell loam, roots, the faint sweetness of fields that lie just beyond this buried darkness. And then, finally, you see it, the dim shimmer of daylight filtering down through cracks in the stone. Thin, pale, and trembling, like light reflected through water. The torch in your hand flares once more before dying entirely, its flame swallowed by the pale dawn of the surface world. You are standing at the border between two ages. Behind you, the Empire of Silence, the Emperor's world of clay, bronze, mercury, and shadow. Ahead of you, the bright accident of discovery. The moment the past awoke. It began, as great revelations often do, not with kings or scholars, but with the simplest of gestures, a man digging a well. It was March of 1974, in the countryside near the city of Xi'an. The earth was dry, cracked from drought. Villagers had gathered with shovels and baskets, hoping to find water to keep their crops alive. They dug through hard soil, one layer after another, until a dull thud rang out, a sound that was not the sound of stone, nor wood, nor earth. Something hollow. Something strange. When the farmer leaned closer, brushing away the dirt with his calloused hand, he saw a curve, a cheekbone, perhaps, or a fragment of pottery. But this was no ordinary pot. The clay was thick, heavy, shaped with impossible precision. He dug further. And then, as the sunlight struck it, a face emerged. Eyes closed. A nose sharp. Lips slightly parted, as though about to speak. A human face, staring up through 2,000 years of soil. Imagine that moment, the breath caught in the farmer's chest, the stillness of the field, the cicadas droning overhead as history itself blinked open. He called to his companions, and they gathered around, half in awe, half in fear. The older ones muttered about spirits. Others laughed uneasily, saying the earth had birthed a god. They didn't know it yet, but they had just uncovered one of the greatest archaeological treasures ever found. At first, they thought it was a single statue, maybe a buried idol from a forgotten temple. But as they dug wider, the ground revealed more: hands, armor, fragments of spears. A whole row of figures hidden just beneath the surface. The villagers reported it to the local authorities. The first archaeologists arrived within weeks, their brushes and measuring tapes trembling with anticipation. What they found exceeded every human expectation. The broken clay was not a single statue, nor even a small group. It was the edge of an entire army. You can imagine their faces, the archaeologists kneeling in the dirt, brushing away centuries of dust. The air thick with disbelief as the outlines of a battlefield emerged beneath their hands. Each figure was life-sized. Each one unique. Some stood, some knelt, some held long silent weapons. The paint on their armor still glimmered faintly in the sun, the last breath of color before it turned to dust. Reds, blues, greens, and golds fading in seconds. They realized, slowly and with growing awe, that this was no mere burial site. It was a city, a necropolis. And at its center, still sealed, still untouched, lay the legendary tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The stories of his underground kingdom, his rivers of mercury, his unending army, they were not myth. They were real. The farmers of Xi'an had woken an empire. You step out through the narrow fissure and blink against the brightness of the world. The land spreads before you, fields, roads, the faint outline of mountains in the distance. Hard to believe that beneath this ordinary earth lies another world, more vast and silent than any cathedral. In 1974, no one could have imagined what those first discoveries would lead to. Excavation teams multiplied, tents rising like a temporary city above the Eternal One. Scholars from every corner of the world came to Xi'an, drawn by the mystery of the Terracotta Army. The first pit revealed over 1,000 soldiers. The second, hundreds more, archers, charioteers, officers, horses. The third appeared to be the command post, where generals stood overseeing the ranks in eternal discipline. Each excavation unearthed something new, something older than memory. But what stunned the world wasn't just the scale, it was the detail. The artistry. The individuality. Here were not faceless warriors, but human beings captured in clay, their expressions frozen mid-thought. It was as if the earth itself had remembered the empire that once ruled it, and was finally ready to speak. And yet, even as the sunlight touched them again, the army began to die a second time. The colors that had survived for millennia vanished within minutes of exposure to air. The pigments, once vibrant as living skin, cracked and fell away, leaving the soldiers pale, ghostly. What had once been a world of color turned gray before the archaeologists' eyes. They tried everything, sealants, chemicals, experiments, but the paint would not stay. The soldiers who had waited centuries in silence were fading even as they were rediscovered, their lifelike brilliance slipping back into shadow. It was as if the emperor himself had cast a spell of secrecy that could not be broken without consequence. Even now, the excavation continues cautiously. Only a fraction of the necropolis has been uncovered. The rest remains hidden beneath the soil, waiting, sleeping. The tomb itself, the emperor's mausoleum, remains sealed. Modern scientists, with all their technology, stand before it just as the artisans once did, hands trembling, afraid to open what was meant never to be opened. For what waits inside is not only fragile, it's lethal. The mercury rivers are still there, seeping through the soil in deadly concentration. The ancient crossbow traps may still be armed, triggered by the faintest vibration. And beyond the danger of death lies something deeper still, the knowledge that once the tomb is opened, its magic, its mystery, will vanish forever. To open it is to end it. And so, like the Emperor's soldiers, the tomb waits in silence. You stand now at the edge of one of the excavation pits, the very one where that farmer first struck clay. The sunlight falls softly over the ranks of warriors below. Tourists walk quietly along raised platforms, their voices hushed as if in a cathedral. Cameras click, but no sound feels adequate here. Each soldier stands exactly as he did when he was first uncovered, arranged in battle formation, eyes fixed on a horizon they can no longer see. Their faces still hold traces of color if you look closely, faint blushes on cheeks, a whisper of red around the lips, a ghost of black where hair once was. The archaeologists have stopped trying to restore them. Instead, they work slowly, carefully, preserving what remains. They know that these soldiers were never meant to be seen again. They were meant to guard, not to perform. And perhaps, in uncovering them, the living world has broken a silence that was sacred. But that's the paradox of history, isn't it? We dig up the past because we can't stand to let it sleep. Every generation that uncovers these clay faces feels the same pull, awe, sorrow, a sense of trespass. The farmers who found the first soldier never imagined their discovery would transform their village into a symbol of China's ancient power. They were paid only a small reward, barely enough to feed their families. Most of them lived the rest of their lives in quiet obscurity, while the world above them spoke the Emperor's name once more. He achieved his immortality after all, just not in the way he'd planned. The man who sought to command eternity is remembered not for the power he wielded in life, but for the quiet he left behind. You lean on the railing, looking down at the soldiers one last time. The afternoon light has begun to fade, turning the chamber's clay surfaces the color of old bone. Shadows stretch between the rows of warriors until they seem almost to move again, shifting softly as if waiting for nightfall to reclaim them. You wonder if they know that the Emperor above them is still sleeping. You wonder if they still feel his command. Somewhere, deep beneath the unbroken mound beyond the pits, the heart of his mausoleum still beats in mercury and gold, untouched. And here, at the edge of that buried world, his army still stands guard, loyal, patient, eternal. You close your eyes for a moment. The sounds of the modern world fade, the hum of cameras, the shuffle of footsteps, the distant murmur of voices. Beneath it all, you can almost hear the faint whisper of the past, the sound of chisels, the crackle of kills, the low murmur of artisans shaping faces in the dark. The air smells faintly of clay and dust. The same air, perhaps, that first filled the Emperor's chambers before they were sealed. You open your eyes again and look down at the faces below. Thousands of them, each one unique, each one alive in its own silent way. You realize that you are standing not above graves, but above stories. Not death, but memory. And as the last light of the day slips away, the soldiers below vanish back into shadow, exactly as they were found, waiting. Waiting for the next hand to reach into the soil. Waiting for the next breath of curiosity. Waiting for history to remember them again. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of earth and rain. Somewhere outside, thunder murmurs. The air grows heavy, charged. The air still smells faintly of rain as you descend once more into the hushed corridors beneath the earth. The sound of water dripping from the ceiling marks time in the darkness, each drop a small reminder of the world above. The soldiers stand below, unchanged, eternal. But around them, the presence of the living hums, a chorus of careful footsteps, quiet voices, the click of cameras, the gentle whisper of brushes over clay. The silence of centuries has been broken not by conquest, but by curiosity. This is no longer the Emperor's world of secrecy and myth. It is the realm of science now, the long, patient awakening of history. The archaeological awakening. It began, as all resurrections do, with wonder. When the first soldiers were pulled from the earth in 1974, the world called it the Eighth Wonder. But the deeper the archaeologists dug, the more the wonder shifted into something else, a slow, deliberate search for meaning. Who built them? How did they survive? And what exactly were they meant to protect? The early excavations uncovered not only warriors, but evidence of a civilization that had understood order in a way the modern world was only beginning to grasp. Each discovery was a revelation. The pits, once thought to be simple burial sites, revealed themselves to be a vast blueprint of imperial power. Every rank, every stance, every formation followed rules as precise as the Emperor's laws. The front lines, archers poised and ready. Behind them, heavy infantry. Chariots flanking the sides. Commanders at the rear, faces carved with solemn patience. It was not death's chaos here, it was eternity's discipline. You pause at the railing above the main chamber, watching as a team of archaeologists moves among the rows of soldiers. They work slowly, tenderly, their hands gloved, their eyes tracing each curve of armor, each fragment of clay. They are not intruders here, they are caretakers. A faint hum fills the air, the soft sound of scanning lasers, mapping every millimeter of these figures. Blue light washes across ancient clay, revealing the tiniest imperfections, the fingerprints of artisans long gone. Those fingerprints were the first voices of the dead to speak. When they were discovered, pressed into the backs of soldiers' heads and beneath armor plates, they changed everything. They'd proved that these were not anonymous works of machinery but the collective labor of thousands of individual artisans. Each print unique, each one a signature of a life lived and lost to time. And in that simple detail, those ridges of skin preserved in clay, the tomb stopped being just a monument to an emperor. It became a conversation between the living and the dead. As the years passed, the technology improved, and so did the understanding. Archaeologists began to see that the soldiers weren't just art, they were engineering. Every figure was made from sections, legs, torsos, arms, heads, produced in workshops spread across the empire. They were assembled like parts of a great machine, then customized by hand, a turn of the head, a twist of the lips, a different knot in the hair. Even individuality, it turned out, had been designed. The Emperor's vision had demanded not chaos but order so complete it could mimic life. Yet within that control, the artisans had found small freedoms, a smirk here, a weary frown there, a spark of defiance in the tilt of a chin. And now, centuries later, those small rebellions have outlived the empire that demanded obedience. It is strange, isn't it, how art always finds a way to resist its maker. You move deeper into the gallery, where bright monitors glow like stars in the half-dark. On their screens, digital soldiers rotate in ghostly color, reconstructed using spectral imaging. Scientists have recreated their original hues: the bright vermilion armor, the deep blue sashes, the glint of bronze spearheads. For the first time in 2 millennia, the army's color has returned, if only in pixels and light. And as you watch those holographic faces flicker across the screen, you realize that archaeology is not just about discovery. It is about remembering how to imagine, to see what once was, and to believe that it might still be. The archaeologists who work here speak often of silence. They say that the most powerful thing about the Terracotta Army isn't its size or its artistry, but its stillness. Thousands of faces, frozen mid-breath. Thousands of eyes, gazing into an endless horizon. When you stand among them, you feel something shift inside you. You stop thinking of history as a line and start feeling it as a circle. Everything that was still is. Everything that is, was once before. And that's when you understand why these scientists spend decades here, brushing dirt from fingertips and tracing cracks in armor. It isn't just about Qin Shi Huang or his obsession with eternity. It's about us, the living, searching for our reflection in the still water of the past. At the far end of the chamber, an older archaeologist kneels beside a soldier whose torso lies shattered in pieces. He is fitting the fragments together with the precision of a surgeon. Each shard is labeled, numbered, measured. It will take months to rebuild just this one man. He pauses, wiping sweat from his brow, and says softly, "We are rebuilding people one breath at a time." You can hear the reverence in his voice. Because this work, slow, delicate, almost devotional, is a kind of resurrection. The past no longer lies buried, it's being pieced back together, face by face, hand by hand. And through it, we learn not only what the Emperor made, but what he feared. Death, yes, but also forgetting. You turn to a nearby display. Inside a glass case lies a single bronze sword. Its edge gleams faintly, sharper than any modern blade of its age has a right to be. Scientists discovered it was coated with a microscopic layer of chromium oxide, an ancient, accidental form of stainless steel. For centuries, the sword lay buried in damp soil, and yet, when uncovered, it gleamed as though freshly polished. The craftsmen who made it could not have known the science behind it. They worked through instinct, intuition, and ritual. But their result was something miraculous, a weapon untouched by time. The Emperor demanded eternity, and in small, strange ways, his people gave it to him. And yet, for all the knowledge on earth, there are things that remain untouchable. No one has opened the Emperor's tomb. No one has seen the rivers of mercury, or the jeweled constellations on the ceiling of his burial chamber. The technology to do so safely does not yet exist. It's as though the tomb itself resists intrusion, as if it knows that its mystery is its immortality. One scientist put it best. We can measure the mercury. We can map the chambers. But what we cannot measure is what happens when we open it. Perhaps that's why it remains sealed. Not just for preservation, but for reverence. Because some stories must stay half-told to remain alive. You glance back once more toward the soldiers, their faces calm and eternal under the low light. Around them, the scientists move like priests in a temple, careful, quiet, awed. Their tools hum softly. The air feels charged, as though every brushstroke might wake another memory from the dust. This is what awakening truly means. Not just to uncover, but to listen. Not just to reveal, but to understand. For every piece of clay restored, another truth rises to the surface. That history is not something buried behind us. It breathes beneath our feet, waiting for us to ask the right questions. You step closer to the edge and rest your hands on the railing. The light glints across the soldiers' faces, and for a moment, it seems as though they're illuminated from within, by the fire of the kills that made them, by the memory of the hands that shaped them, by the living eyes that now study them. A soft wind drifts through the hall, and you feel it, the meeting of two eternities, the Emperor's and ours. You turn toward the next tunnel, where the light grows dim once more. The hum of machines fades behind you. Ahead, only darkness and the quiet promise of what's still unknown. You take a slow breath, the air cool and full of earth. The sound of your footsteps mingles with a deeper rhythm, the heartbeat of the tomb itself. And as you step into that silence, you realize, this awakening is not the end of the story. It is only the beginning. The hum of machines fades behind you as you move deeper into the quiet. The air changes once more, still, dry, faintly metallic. The tunnel widens, and you find yourself standing before another chamber, one that seems to breathe with its own strange rhythm. The soldiers wait below, their forms ghostly in the pale, artificial light. From above, they look like an ocean of ash-gray faces. A silent tide that has forgotten it was once alive with color. At first glance, you think they were always this way, stone-gray, lifeless, austere. But that, you soon realize, is a kind of illusion. For centuries, these soldiers slept in full color, their armor blazing red and black, their robes glimmering in blue and green, their lips and cheeks flushed with the pigments of life. They were never meant to be pale. They were meant to shine. When archaeologists first brushed away the soil in 1974, the world gasped, not just at the scale of the discovery, but at its color. Beneath the layers of dust, the soldiers' faces emerged radiant, almost warm. The clay shimmered with lacquer, paint, and gold leaf. Their eyes gleamed, their hair gleamed, their armor glowed. Imagine it, the pit lit by morning sun, the first figures rising from the soil like ghosts returning to life, each one clothed in brightness, their colors fierce and full, their bodies breathing the memory of a world that had waited 2,000 years to be seen again. The first archaeologists stood stunned, almost afraid to move. Some said it was like looking upon the living dead. Others whispered that the emperor's army had woken. But then, within moments of exposure to air, the miracle began to vanish. The paint cracked. The lacquer peeled. The color died. It happened so fast they couldn't stop it. The brilliant reds and blues turned dull, then ashen, curling off in thin flakes. The lacquer, made from the sap of the Chinese lacquer tree, had been sealed away for 2 millennia in perfect darkness and humidity. Once oxygen touched it, it shrank and broke apart, taking the pigment with it. The archaeologists watched helplessly as the color fell away like autumn leaves. Within an hour of excavation, the life that had survived 2,000 years was gone. It's hard to imagine that kind of loss. To uncover beauty that has waited half of recorded history, only to watch it fade before your eyes. One archaeologist later wrote in his notes, "We felt as though we were witnessing a second death." You step closer to the edge of the pit. The light catches faint traces of pigment still clinging to the soldiers' faces, soft pink around a cheekbone, a line of black where an eyebrow once was, a hint of red at the corner of a mouth. It's just enough to remind you that they were once alive in color, but not enough to let you see it. And that's the cruel wonder of it. These figures are at once eternal and fading, preserved and perishing, each one caught between existence and erasure. The scientists who study them now move with impossible care. When they uncover a new soldier, they seal it immediately in an airtight chamber, filling the space with inert gas to slow the decay. They work against time itself, painting with nothing but patience and precision. For every inch of color they save, another fades beyond reach. You imagine the workshop where those pigments were first mixed, mortar and pestle grinding minerals into dust, bowls of cinnabar red, azurite blue, malachite green. The artisans painting by torchlight, careful not to spill a drop. They would have worked slowly, whispering perhaps, because in this tomb even creation was a sacred act. They believed color had power. Red for life, for fire, for the emperor's divine vitality. Black for strength and protection. Blue for immortality, the color of the heavens. Each hue chosen to honor the cosmic order that the emperor had claimed to rule. They painted not just soldiers, but an entire ideology. When the emperor looked upon his finished army, he didn't see clay. He saw his reflection, a world remade in his image, burning with the colors of dominion and eternity. Now those colors survive only in fragments, hidden beneath microscopes and digital reconstructions. The emperor's dream still breathes, but only through the memory of what once shimmered here. You kneel beside one of the restoration tables. A fragment of a warrior's armor rests beneath glass, its scales outlined in pale crimson. The restoration team works in silence, their faces reflected in the smooth surface. Each motion is slow, deliberate, a kind of ritual. A conservator adjusts her magnifying glass, then whispers, "The color is still there. Just too faint for the eye." She turns the fragment under the light. The pigment shimmers faintly, the barest hint of red deep in the crevices of the clay. For an instant it seems to glow, and you realize how thin the line is between what is gone and what endures. The past never truly disappears. It simply hides in wavelengths we can't yet see. The vanishing colors have become one of archaeology's greatest paradoxes. Every act of discovery is also an act of destruction. To bring the past into light is to alter it forever. Perhaps that's why the tomb remains sealed. Maybe the archaeologists know that once it's opened, its colors will vanish too. That the brilliance waiting inside, the jeweled ceiling, the mercury rivers, the gold and jade, will fade the moment light touches it. And so they wait. They preserve what silence can still protect. Some knowledge, like beauty, survives only in darkness. You wander further down the observation path, past glass walls that separate the excavated pits from those still untouched. In one, you can just see the curve of a soldier's helmet emerging from the soil. The color still clings to it, rich and deep, sealed in shadow. The archaeologists will not uncover him yet. They will wait until technology can save the paint before they dare to lift him into the light. It's an act of mercy, of patience rare in the modern world. To know that something is there, waiting, and to choose not to disturb it. That, too, is a kind of reverence. You stop beside a display showing digital reconstructions of what the army once looked like. The screens glow with color, brilliant reds, deep blues, shining bronze. The figures come to life, their eyes fierce, their armor vivid, their ranks endless. For a moment, you can almost believe you're seeing it as it was, the Emperor's eternal host, lit by the flicker of torchlight and the gleam of lacquered shields. And then you blink, and it's gone again, just pixels on glass, a simulation of life. But maybe that's fitting. Every age remakes the past in its own image. The Emperor used clay. We use light. Both are fragile. Both are beautiful. Both fade. The rain has stopped outside. The air in the chamber feels lighter now, as if the tomb itself is exhaling after the long breath of centuries. You take one last look at the rows of soldiers below, their colors gone but their presence undiminished. They do not need paint to live. Their silence is color enough. And yet, as you turn to leave, a thought lingers, perhaps, in the darkness of night, when the lights are dimmed and the air grows still again, their colors return. Perhaps, unseen by human eyes, the reds bloom once more, the blues glimmer faintly, the gold returns to the edges of their armor. Perhaps they are still as the Emperor left them, brilliant, proud, and alive in the silence he built for them. Because the past, like color, never truly dies. It waits in the dark for the right kind of light. You climb the stone steps back toward the tunnel. Behind you, the army stands as it always has, colorless, timeless, endless. Their painted glory gone, their truth laid bare. And as the shadows close around you, you carry that image with you. The vanishing colors that once lit a kingdom underground. The pigments that turned to dust in the air. The memory of a world that lived in brilliance. And the quiet, eternal beauty that remains when the light goes out. The light fades again as you leave the chamber of vanished colors. The world narrows back into tunnel and silence. Your footsteps echo softly against stone. Somewhere above, the wind moves through the grass that covers the Emperor's mound, but down here there is only the slow, steady pulse of the earth. The air grows cooler, denser, the smell of damp clay thickens, laced now with something metallic and faintly sweet. Mercury. You can almost taste it, that ghostly shimmer that has haunted every scientist brave enough to probe this ground. The Emperor's breath, they call it. You are descending not just through soil, but through the layers where reason and mystery touch. The archaeologists call it data. The old poets would have called it a haunting. And here, between the two, the story continues. This is the realm where science meets myth. The deeper you go, the stranger the world becomes. The instruments hum. Sensors buried in the walls whisper their readings. Laser scanners sweep the darkness, revealing voids within the mound, hollow spaces arranged with perfect symmetry. A subterranean city, just as the old chronicles said. But beyond the maps and measurements, something else persists, an unease that no calculation can dissolve. Even the scientists speak softly here. as if afraid that sound itself might wake what sleeps below. They have measured the mercury concentration in the soil. They have found traces of lead, iron, and arsenic, all signs that the Emperor's rivers of death still flow. Yet they cannot explain how those chambers remain intact after 2,000 years of shifting earth. The ground should have collapsed, the walls should have crumbled, the tomb should have drowned in its own poison. But it hasn't. It endures, untouched, sealed by something that is not merely engineering. You pass through a narrow corridor where cables and pipes line the walls. The archaeologists have built their instruments here, a quiet laboratory within the ancient dark. Monitors glow softly, showing radar scans of the tomb below, rings of chambers, concentric and perfect. At the center, a void that no probe can clearly define. That is where the Emperor lies, and where myth still resists the reach of machines. For all their precision, the scientists cannot see what waits at the core. Every attempt to pierce the chamber with sensors meets interference, magnetic distortion, unexplained static, readings that flicker and die. Some say it's the mercury, scattering signals. Others whisper that it's something else, the echo of the Emperor's will, still guarding his last sanctuary. They don't laugh when they say it. Not here. Science has tried to illuminate every shadow of this place, but the shadows always answer back. The first emperor of China was more than a man. He was a mythmaker, and his myth has outlived every dynasty that followed. He claimed to rule by mandate of heaven, to hold the balance of the 5 elements within himself. When he built his tomb, he was not just preparing for death, he was designing his own resurrection. Every wall, every corridor, every carved symbol within the mausoleum reflects cosmic order. The earth mound above is shaped like the sacred mountain Kunlun, the axis between heaven and the underworld. The palace within mirrors the constellations of the northern sky. The rivers of Mercury represent the oceans that separate the living from the dead. It is an alchemical map of the universe. So when modern scientists look upon it, what they study is not just architecture, it is belief itself, petrified into form. One archaeologist once said, "This is where physics and prayer shake hands." He meant that the more we uncover, the less certain we become of what we know. Consider this. The mercury found in the soil should have long since evaporated, scattered by centuries of heat and water. Yet the readings remain strong, stronger than chemistry allows. Some propose that the concentration deep below must be vast, perhaps even flowing still, a slow metallic tide. But if that's true, it means the tomb is alive in a way no tomb should be, self-preserving, self-contained, still in motion. There are legends among the workers who maintain the site. They say that sometimes, on windless nights, the air around the mound seems to hum faintly, a sound too low to record. They say that birds never roost on the hill, that their flight paths veer away as if guided by some ancient repulsion. No one has proven it. No one can. But the myth is patient. You stop beside a display case set up within the corridor. Inside lies a small tablet of bamboo, darkened with age, the writing barely visible. It's a copy of an older text, one found in a nearby tomb, the Book of the Golden Elixirs. It describes the search for immortality in words both scientific and mystical. Formulas for mixing cinnabar and mercury, for smelting jade into powders of life. Rituals for aligning the body's breath with the stars. The emperor's alchemists followed these instructions with devotion. They built furnaces that burned day and night, distilling liquid silver and vaporized stones. They believed that if the body could be filled with the right balance of the 5 elements, earth, fire, water, metal, and wood, it would never decay. Science now tells us those elixirs were poison. But faith made them beautiful. You move further in. A faint hum rises in the distance, the sound of another experiment running. Beyond a curtain of plastic sheeting, scientists are using ground-penetrating radar to study the unexcavated core of the tomb. Their screens show swirling patterns, lines of density and void. One of them turns and notices you watching. Her voice is quiet, reverent. "We can see the shape," she says, "but we can't touch it. The technology isn't ready." You ask her what she means. She smiles faintly. "If we open it now, the air will destroy everything. The murals, the metals, the fabrics. 2,000 years gone in seconds. And besides..." She hesitates, then adds softly, "Some things are meant to stay sealed." You can hear the conflict in her tone, the scientist longing to see, the human being afraid to trespass. It's the same conflict that has haunted everyone who's ever stood above this tomb. Even the old chronicler Xi'an, writing a century after the emperor's death, said that the tomb was guarded by crossbows rigged to fire automatically, that the very air inside was deadly, and that no one should disturb the sovereign's rest. 2,000 years later, that warning still holds. Perhaps it's superstition. Perhaps it's wisdom. Either way, the result is the same, a tomb that remains inviolate. A secret shared between the emperor and the earth. You walk slowly back toward the central chamber, where the air grows heavier again. The mercury scent sharpens, metallic and clean. Beneath your feet, the floor vibrates faintly, the earth alive with the quiet heartbeat of all that remains hidden below. You think of the alchemists who promised the emperor eternal life, and how their failure became his immortality. You think of the scientists who now trace those same paths of curiosity, chasing the same dream of understanding, though in a different language. And you realize that not much has changed. The tools are new, but the hunger is ancient. We still reach into the dark hoping to find a version of ourselves that does not end. At the far end of the tunnel, you find a narrow window cut into the stone, no larger than a book. Through it, you can see the edge of the Emperor's Mound, dimly lit by the night sky above. The stars shimmer faintly, mirrored by the invisible constellations buried below. Science calls them minerals. Myth calls them heaven. Perhaps they're both right. Because what else is knowledge, if not a kind of faith, that by naming the world, we can understand it? And what else is myth, if not a kind of science, the oldest experiment in meaning? The Emperor's tomb stands between them still, unyielding, waiting for both to converge. You stay there a while, listening to the low murmur of machines, the soft scrape of brushes, the eternal hush of the tomb. Somewhere below, a river of mercury may still flow. Somewhere above, the stars continue their patient orbit. And you, standing here between earth and sky, realize that the difference between science and myth is not opposition, it is conversation. One tries to measure the world. The other tries to understand why it matters. The Emperor's dream contained both. You turn at last, beginning the long walk back through the tunnel. The air grows warmer with each step, the metallic scent fading into the smell of wet soil and life. Behind you, the instruments continue to hum, recording, measuring, learning. Ahead, faint light flickers, the promise of another dawn. You climb, your hand brushing the rough wall. The stone feels alive, pulsing with everything still unsaid. And for a moment, you imagine that beneath your palm, the Emperor feels it too, that he knows the living world is still listening, still asking, still believing. The scientist and the mystic, the Emperor and the Earth, all whispering the same truth. We endure through the stories that remember us. The air feels warmer now as you ascend from the realm of machines and myth. The tunnel opens again into the vast chamber where the silent ranks of the Emperor's army wait beneath their thin veil of dust. Your torch, or perhaps your own imagination, trembles in your hand. Every shadow looks like a figure turning its head, every echo like the faint shuffle of feet resuming their ancient post. You have come full circle, to the Guardians themselves. The army that began this story. The Watchers who have never slept. For over 2,000 years they have stood here, shoulder to shoulder, patient beyond comprehension. The Emperor's command has long since turned to dust, the world above has changed beyond recognition, and still they remain, faithful, motionless, eternal. These are the guardians of the afterlife. You walk between their ranks. The light follows you, brushing their faces, glinting in the hollows of their eyes. From a distance, they seem identical, disciplined, uniform, an army of one will. But up close, each is distinct. You see it now more clearly than ever. The small variations in posture, the hint of muscle beneath armor, the curve of a smile, the slight lift of a brow. They are not symbols of obedience anymore. They are portraits of humanity, an entire civilization cast into clay. When the emperor died, he was buried with these men so that his empire might continue in the next world. But the truth is gentler, more mysterious. For the first time in millennia, as you stand among them, they do not seem like guards. They seem like witnesses. They are not protecting him from the living. They are protecting us from forgetting. The air in the chamber is still, yet thick with presence. You can almost feel the weight of their attention, as if their eyes follow you in silence. These soldiers were made to defend the Emperor's spirit, but now they defend something much greater, memory itself. Each man here, sculpted, fired, painted, then buried, represents the same longing that made the Emperor build his underground world, the desire to last, to be remembered, to matter beyond one's years. The Emperor sought immortality through power, but his artisans found it through creation. They may not have been kings, but through their hands, something eternal was made. You stop beside a kneeling archer. His bow is long gone, but his stance remains perfect, knees bent, back straight, gaze forward. There's something humble in his posture, something deeply human. The centuries have stripped away his weapon, his paint, his name, and yet his purpose endures. You imagine him at the moment of creation, the artisan shaping the curve of his jaw, smoothing the clay over his shoulders, painting the veins of his hands. The sculptor's breath would have mingled with the steam of the wet clay, the room filled with the hiss of kilns and the low murmur of workers. That same breath, in a way, still lingers here, trapped in the pores of the clay, sealed beneath the earth. You realize then that the army is not an army at all. It is a chorus of breaths held for eternity. For centuries, people saw them only as instruments of power, evidence of a ruler's vanity. But to walk among them now is to feel something else, devotion. Not to conquest, but to the act of remembrance. The artisans who made them poured themselves into their work. They carved not just soldiers, but souls. Perhaps they knew the Emperor's ambition would fail. Perhaps they understood that death cannot be conquered by command. So instead, they chose a different immortality, the kind that comes from making something beautiful. That beauty has outlived every empire that rose and fell above it. You keep walking. The silence deepens. In the half-light, the soldiers seem to breathe. Some lean forward, as though listening, others turn ever so slightly toward one another, frozen mid-conversation. The clay is cracked, the edges chipped, but their expressions remain. There's something profoundly comforting in their stillness. These are not the restless dead. They do not haunt. They endure. Their strength is not in their swords or their armor. It is in their patience. They have learned what the Emperor could not, that eternity is not about control. It is about surrender. At the center of the chamber stands a general, taller than the others, his face calm and grave. The archaeologists call him the silent commander. His armor is more ornate, his stance more relaxed. You stand before him for a long time, studying the lines of his face. He looks less like a soldier and more like a philosopher, someone who has seen too much and learned that power is only one kind of endurance. You wonder if his sculptor meant it that way, if this was their quiet rebellion, to give the Emperor a leader who understood peace more than war. Perhaps that is why he stands here still, the commander of a motionless army, teaching silence to time itself. You step closer. His features are exquisite, broad forehead, deep-set eyes, a faint trace of age at the corners of his mouth. It's easy to believe he could have been real. Maybe he was. Maybe he led men in battle, or oversaw the Emperor's army in life, only to be recreated here by those who remembered him. In that sense, Every soldier is a tomb within a tomb. Inside each clay face lies another face, a memory of someone who once existed. And maybe that's why they feel so alive. The artisans, forbidden to carve their names, immortalize their world in these men instead, their friends, their commanders, their fathers, their brothers. The emperor demanded perfection, but the sculptors gave him truth. You move again, passing rows of faces illuminated by low light. The shadows fall like waves across them, one moment sharp, the next dissolving into softness. You catch glimpses of laughter in one expression, weariness in another, defiance in a third. They are us, you think. The same mix of courage, doubt, longing. And suddenly it's easy to forget that they were made to serve a dead emperor. They feel instead like companions in the long human story, reminders that even when power fades, creation endures. They were built for eternity, but they have found something better. They have found purpose. The archaeologists who work here often describe the sensation of being watched. They say that when they walk alone through the pits at night, the soldiers seem to shift, not in movement but in presence, as if the air itself thickens with awareness. Perhaps it's imagination, or perhaps it's the echo of thousands of human hours pressed into clay. Art has memory, after all. And maybe these figures remember not the emperor's orders, but the warmth of the hands that made them. That would explain the gentleness in their faces, the quiet dignity that has survived even the collapse of dynasties. They are not merely guardians of a man's ambition. They are guardians of everything human in that ambition, the hope, the fear, the tenderness. You stop again, looking out over the endless rows of still faces. The air feels heavy with presence, yet somehow peaceful. If you listen closely, you can almost hear them breathing together, a sound so deep it could be mistaken for the earth itself. It's in that soundless rhythm that you finally understand the truth of the Terracotta Army. They were not meant to fight. They were meant to wait. To stand watch until memory itself grew tired, and then to wait some more. They are the embodiment of patience, the proof that devotion can outlast death. The emperor sought immortality through control, but his army achieved it through surrender. They yielded to time, and in doing so, they conquered it. You take a slow breath and look one last time at the sea of faces stretching into the dark. The torchlight flickers across them, and for a moment, it feels as though they lean closer, their silence almost compassionate. And you realize, they no longer belong to the emperor. They belong to everyone who has ever looked upon them and felt the weight of history press gently against the heart. They are not only his guardians anymore. They are ours. They guard the story of what it means to be human, fragile, brief, yet yearning always to endure. As you turn to leave, your footsteps echo softly through the hall, mingling with the eternal hush. Behind you, the soldiers remain as they have always been, still, steadfast, facing the horizon that no longer exists. But in their silence there is no sorrow, only peace. They have already fulfilled their purpose. They have proven that art, once made with devotion, does not die. It stands quietly until the world remembers how to look. And perhaps that is all any of us can hope for, to become, in our own way, guardians of something worth remembering. The tunnel narrows again as you move away from the last chamber of faces. The air grows still, heavier than before, thick with the weight of dust that has not been disturbed in centuries. The sound of your footsteps fades until it seems you are no longer walking at all, but floating through quiet. The echo that once answered you is gone. Even the soft hum of machines, the murmur of archaeologists, the drip of distant water, everything has vanished. This is the heart of silence. You stop listening. Nothing. Not even your own breath seems to belong to you anymore. The air doesn't move. The earth feels expectant, as though holding something just beneath the surface, a secret too vast, too sacred, to be spoken aloud. This is where time itself goes to sleep. The eternal silence. You turn slowly, taking in what you can see of the chamber. It is vast, but not empty. The soldiers' ranks thin out here, their faces fading into darkness. Beyond them, faint outlines of horses, chariots, and banners half buried in soil. There's a strange stillness to it all, not just the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper, older. A kind of listening. You can almost believe that the silence itself is alive, that the very air is aware of you, watching. You try to imagine what this place sounded like when it was new, the clang of hammers, the hiss of molten bronze, the rhythm of chisels carving clay. The breathing of thousands of workers, the barked orders of overseers, the distant hum of furnaces. Now all that remains is stillness, so complete it swallows even the memory of sound. The Terracotta Army stands frozen, every soldier mid-breath, mid-thought, mid-motion. They were made to be eternal, and they have become exactly that. Yet eternity, you realize, has a sound of its own, a kind of endless pause. The Emperor wanted control over time. He wanted to stop it, to hold it still so that nothing could decay, nothing could be lost. He succeeded. But in doing so, he created a silence so perfect that even life itself cannot enter. That is the paradox of immortality. To last forever, one must stop changing. To stop changing, one must stop living. And so, his world endures, but only as an echo of what was. You walk between two rows of soldiers. Their shadows lean across the floor, merging into one another until you can no longer tell where one ends and the next begins. In the flickering light, the illusion deepens. They seem to move, ever so slightly, shifting with the rhythm of your breath. You whisper something, you're not sure what. Maybe a greeting. Maybe an apology. The sound dies before it reaches the far wall. It's as though this place absorbs every word, drinking it in like water through sand. The silence here is not emptiness. It is presence. A presence vast enough to hold an empire. You pause near the edge of a pit, staring down at a line of kneeling archers. Their heads are bowed slightly, their eyes fixed on some unseen point in the dark. It feels like a prayer frozen in time. You remember what the chronicles said, that when the tomb was sealed, thousands of workers were locked inside, entombed alive to keep the emperor's secrets. Their cries, if they ever came, have long since dissolved into this silence. Perhaps that is what you feel now, not the absence of sound, but the weight of all the sounds that once were. The silence is their monument. And yet there is peace in it. You find yourself breathing slower, calmer. The tension that comes from awe begins to soften into something else, something like acceptance. The Emperor's world is gone, but in this stillness, he has achieved what he desired most. His empire no longer moves, no longer breaks, no longer fades. Everything is preserved in the perfect stasis of memory. The silence becomes not oppressive, but sacred. You sit on a low stone ledge, the dust cool beneath your hands. Above you, the faint light catches the outlines of the clay figures, turning them to silhouettes, human shapes without detail, timeless and vast. You think of the centuries between then and now, dynasties rising and falling, cities burning and rebuilding, the language changing, the very earth shifting. Yet through all of it, this chamber has remained untouched. 2,000 years of silence. 2,000 years of patience. And perhaps that's the true miracle, not that they were built, but that they endured. The archaeologists who work here often say that silence is the hardest thing to explain. They bring their instruments, their scanners, their algorithms, and still, what defines this place cannot be measured. The stillness seeps into them. They speak more quietly here. They move more slowly. Some say that after long days in the pit, they dream differently, dreams filled with stillness, as if the silence follows them home. They don't call it haunting. They call it listening. It's as though the past is waiting for the right kind of attention, and until it receives it, it will remain silent. You stand again and walk toward the far end of the chamber. The floor slopes gently downward, leading toward a wall of packed earth. Beyond that wall lies the Emperor's tomb itself, sealed, untouched, deadly. No one has crossed it. No one has dared. Modern science could pierce it, of course. The technology exists. But every time the question arises, there's hesitation, something more than caution. It's as if even the most rational minds feel that to open the tomb would break not just stone, but silence itself, and once broken, it could never be restored. Some things are not meant to be heard. Some silences are holy. You reach out and touch the wall. It's cool, almost damp. The texture is uneven, layered from centuries of compression. Beneath your fingertips, the vibrations of the earth hum faintly, not sound, but sensation, the heartbeat of the world. You realize that this silence is not absence at all. It's fullness. It's the sound of everything that has ever been, compressed into stillness. It is not the silence of death. It is the silence of eternity. You close your eyes and listen again. If you let go of the need to hear, you begin to feel the rhythm of it, the faint tremor of mercury rivers moving below, the slow settling of earth above, the pulse of your own heart answering theirs. For a moment, the boundary between you and this place dissolves. You are no longer visitor and tomb, you are part of the same breath, the same silence. And you understand, finally, what the Emperor achieved. Not immortality of body, but of being. He has become inseparable from the earth. His silence is now the silence of all things. You open your eyes. The soldiers still stand as they always have, unblinking, undisturbed. But something has changed, not in them, but in you. You no longer see them as relics. You see them as reminders. That everything ends. That everything endures. That silence, in the end, is not the enemy of life, but its echo. The Emperor's voice has not vanished, it has simply grown too deep to be heard. You turn to leave. The light fades behind you, swallowed by the vast quiet. Each step takes you closer to the world above, where wind and sound and chaos rule. But part of you stays behind, buried in that stillness, among the guardians and the unspoken. The silence follows you, not as emptiness, but as memory, a hum at the edge of hearing, reminding you that somewhere beneath your feet, a world still stands untouched, waiting, listening. And as you emerge into the air and light of day, you understand the gift the past has given. That the truest immortality is not in speech, but in silence. Not in what we leave behind, but in how the world still listens for us after we are gone. You emerge from the tunnel slowly, as if surfacing from a dream. The air feels lighter now, cool and open, carrying with it the faint scent of earth after rain. Behind you, the Emperor's world lies sealed in perfect darkness, a silence that has lasted more than 2,000 years. Before you stretches the living world, the hum of engines, the voices of tourists, the soft flutter of birds that circled the fields of Xi'an. You stand for a moment between the two, life and afterlife, sound and stillness, history and eternity. The transition feels unreal. After so long in the tomb's breathless quiet, every sound now seems fragile, temporary, like ripples on the surface of something infinite and calm beneath. You look back toward the mound rising from the plains, the green, rounded hill that hides the Emperor's palace of death. It looks so ordinary from here, just another fold in the land. But you know better now. You have walked its veins of stone and mercury, its corridors of clay and silence. You have felt the heartbeat of a dream that refuses to fade. And now you understand what Qin Shi Huang truly built. It was never just a tomb. It was a question. A question whispered to time itself. What does it mean to live forever? He was the first emperor of a united China, a man who commanded armies, ordered mountains to move, and bent the world to his will. He built walls that touched the horizon, roads that crossed the continent, and laws that bound a people into one. But even with all his conquests, there was one realm he could not master: death. He feared it more than rebellion, more than defeat. It was said he awoke in the night trembling, haunted by the knowledge that even emperors turn to dust. And so he waged his final war, not against men, but against time. He sent ships in search of elixirs, drank mercury to outweak decay, built a kingdom beneath the earth so that his reign would never end. And yet, in seeking to conquer death, he became its servant. His body is gone. His palace has crumbled. But the dream he forged, the idea of eternity made tangible, remains. That is his paradox. That is his triumph. You walk slowly across the field toward the museum complex. The grass rustles underfoot. The air hums with faint warmth, the scent of iron and dust. You can almost feel the centuries pressing upward from below, the faint vibrations of that buried army still keeping its vigil. And as you walk, you realize, Qin Shi Huang did not fail. Not entirely. The immortality he sought in flesh he found instead in memory. He endures in the hands of those who built for him, in the eyes of those who later uncovered his army, in the hearts of all who stand now in wonder before the clay faces he left behind. Every tourist who walks these halls becomes part of his story. Every whisper of awe, every flash of a camera, every quiet tear shed over the beauty of those silent soldiers, they all breathe life back into him. He is remembered. And that is immortality enough. The sun slips lower, casting the fields in gold. You turn back one last time. From here, the mound glows faintly in the dying light. You think of what lies beneath, the rivers of mercury still winding in darkness, the constellations of jewels glinting unseen, the emperor himself surrounded by the army that never sleeps. He wanted eternity, and he got it. But not the kind he imagined. He has become an idea, a bridge between ambition and art, between fear and faith, between death and the stubborn will to defy it. And what an idea it is, to stand against time, to sculpt one's dreams into clay, to declare that the human hand can make something that lasts longer than its own heart. That is not hubris anymore. That is hope. You pause at the edge of the excavation hall. Inside, the soldiers stand beneath soft electric light, their gray forms endless, unmoving, serene. People walk quietly along the platforms, their voices hushed to whispers. Children press their faces to the glass. Elderly couples stand hand in hand, tears in their eyes. None of them are thinking of conquest. None of them are thinking of power. They are thinking of time, and art, and love, the way the human spirit keeps reaching beyond itself. It's easy to imagine that if the emperor could see them now, he might finally understand what his army was truly for. Not to protect him, but to preserve the beauty of being remembered. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. Beneath the quiet murmur of the living world, you can still hear it, the faint hum of eternity. It's not a sound you can describe. It's more like the feeling of standing near something vast and ancient, something that remembers you as much as you remember it. You think of the soldiers in their rows, of the artisans who shaped them, of the scientists who now study them. So many hands, across so many lifetimes, all touching the same earth, all part of the same story. And you realize, immortality isn't about never dying. It's about connection, across time, across dust, across silence. Every life leaves a mark. Every mark becomes memory. Every memory becomes clay. We are all terracotta soldiers in our own way, guardians of the moments that shaped us, standing watch over the fragile empires of our lives. The sky darkens slowly. A single bird wheels overhead, its wings cutting a pale line through the dusk. The stars begin to appear, faint at first, then brighter, until the heavens look like the ceiling of the emperor's tomb, studded with light. He wanted the universe to lie above him forever. And perhaps, in a way, it does. Because every night, as the stars burn quietly over Xi'an, their light passes through the thin skin of Earth and touches the clay faces below. It slides down the slanted walls, glows briefly on bronze and dust, and disappears into the dark. It is the closest thing to a conversation between heaven and earth that still exists. The Emperor's dream continues, not in power, but in wonder. You stand for a while longer, letting that realization settle. Around you, the evening deepens. The fields grow quiet again, the air cool and still. Somewhere far below, the eternal army waits, exactly as it has for 2 millennia, unmoving, unbroken, faithful to a command that has long since turned to silence. And yet, perhaps that silence is not an end, but a beginning. Because silence is not emptiness. It is the space where meaning lives. It is the pause between breaths where history listens. You take one last slow breath of the evening air. The world feels vast and ancient, yet tender somehow, alive with the same patience that keeps those clay faces whole. The Emperor's voice may have vanished, but his story hums in every heartbeat of the earth. He became what he most desired, not immortal in flesh, but eternal in memory. You turn to leave. The stars above are countless, sharp and cold. You walk toward the edge of the field where the path disappears into darkness. The faint wind carries the scent of clay and rain, the perfume of the earth itself, ancient, unending. And as you walk, you hear it again, the whisper that has followed you through every corridor, every silence, every revelation. Remember us. You smile, quietly, and whisper back, I will. Because you will. Because none of them are gone. Not really. They are waiting still, in the cool depths of time, an empire asleep beneath the soil, a reminder that even in death, we build, we dream, we endure. And so, as the night folds around you, you carry their story with you, clay, silence, immortality, and all. The Emperor's heart may have stopped, but his world still beats in the rhythm of your breath, in the warmth of your awe, in the soft rustle of the living earth. And somewhere beneath your feet, 1,000 soldiers stand guard, not just over him, but over everything that refuses to be forgotten. And so, as the night settles over the fields of Xi'an, may these echoes of the past guide you gently into dreams, dreams of empires that never truly die, of faces that still watch from the dark, and of the quiet truth that eternity was never meant to be feared. It was meant to be remembered. Because in the end, everything, every wall, every hand, every breath, turns to clay. And clay, if shaped with devotion, never forgets.